Chapter 1034. The Heavenly Enchantress? Mua. Czar Kaiyun consecutively struck out with all three attacks of the Way of the Tyrant's Sword. Each attack belonged to the upper levels of Saint tier battle skills, equal to a casual strike from Saint Emperors. Even Saint Kings at great perfection would become heavily injured if the three attacks landed on them. Only a similar Saint tier battle skill could repel it. There were also differences in power among Saint tier battle skill. The Way of the Tyrant's blade possessed a total of 3 attacks, and each attack was more powerful than the previous one. These factors allowed it to be ranked close to the top among all Saint tier battle skills. With Czar Kaiyun's great talent, she had comprehended the mysteries of the battle skill to the limit, and she had also reached great proficiency with its use. Her strength at the peak of the 8th heavenly layer combined perfectly with the Saint tier battle skill, allowed her to use the skill to its full potential. Jianqun became extremely stern. The battle skill's vast pressure tightly locked onto his entire body, which caused him to feel like he was submerged in mud. Every action felt difficult. The Saint artifact had been knocked away. Although it quickly flew toward him through his mental connection, it would not be able to make it. Looks like I can only use the Octaterra Divine Hall, Jianqun thought. The Octaterra Divine Hall was in ruins, but Czar Kaiyun's Saint tier battle skill was only a casual strike from a Saint Emperor. Its strength was nowhere Kaiser's punch, so the Divine Hall could easily block the strike despite its state. Suddenly, figure flashed before him, just as Jianqun wanted to bring out the Divine Hall. Rui Jin had appeared silently before Jianqun, while the sacred dragon's sword in his hand radiated with a terrifying presence. Slivers of origin energy slowly pulsed and radiated with a profound aura. Rui Jin stood like a steel wall before Jianqun. As he swung out with his sword, an extremely powerful sword chi immediately shot out towards Czar Kaiyun with a devastating might. The second sword chi from Czar Kaiyun collided with the sword chi from the sacred dragon's sword, and immediately produced a deafening boom. The giant sword chi seemed as fragile as tofu, and dispersed without much difficulty at all. Rui Jin's sacred dragon's sword contained origin energy, so when he used it to send out a sword chi, it would possess a sliver of origin energy as well. This was a power that surpassed Saint Emperors, something that belonged to a completely different level. Its strength was beyond suspicion, something incomparable to the powers of this world. The attack from the sacred dragon's sword tore through the other attack like a hot knife through butter. Then, it continued toward Czar Kaiyun's third attack with no reduction in force. Czar Kaiyun's expression suddenly changed when she sensed the power of Rui Jin's attack. She extended a finger and immediately, the countless sword chi created from the third move changed in trajectory and formed a straight line. They all charged toward Rui Jin's sword chi with origin energy. With consecutive booms, Rui Jin's sword chi charged through all the sword chi like a wild beast with stoppable momentum. It caused the smaller sword chi to explode as soon as they made contact. They turned it into surging energy of the world that dispersed in the surroundings. Rui Jin's single sword chi from the Radiant Dragon's sword broke through 2 attacks from Czar Kaiyun's Saint tier battle skill. In the end, it passed through her chest and disappeared into the horizon. Czar Kaiyun's body trembled violently as agony filled her face. Her presence quickly began to decrease, and she began to fall out of the sky like a broken kite. Kaiyun! A cry rang out from afar. Hao Wu had shot over as a blur with lightning speed, as he fused with the surrounding space. He firmly caught Czar Kaiyun. Then he wanted to flee into the distance. Leave this person behind. Jianqun did not know Hao Wu. He immediately cried out when he saw that someone wanted to save Czar Kaiyun. As such, he used the illusory flash and arrived before the unknown individual in an instant. His emperor armament transformed into a streak of black light as it stabbed mercilessly toward Czar Kaiyun. A 3 fingers wide sword immediately appeared in Hao Wu's hands. It shone with an earthen yellow light as it stabbed out like a lightning bolt. 8th heavenly layer Saint King. Jianqun could sense Hao Wu's strength once he lashed out. It was actually at the same cultivation level as Czar Kaiyun, just slightly weaker than her as it was not at the peak. Just as Hao Wu's sword was about to collide with the emperor armament, the space 1,000 meters away began to twist violently. Vaguely, the rippling space seemed to form a huge zither 1,000 meters long, with 36 clearly visible strings. Ding! The strings began to tremble slowly and produced a gentle note of the zither. A transparent musical note that seemed to be formed from the surrounding space flew out. Then, it simultaneously collided with Jian Chen's emperor armament and Hao Wu's saint weapon with unbelievable speed. Clang! An extremely powerful sound wave erupted when the musical note collided with the emperor armament and saint weapon. It seemed to be able to shake up one's soul, shocking people's eardrums into temporary deafness. The terrifying sound wave caused the minds of the saint rulers, who watched from afar, to blank out, as if their souls were gone. Jian Chen and Hao Wu's arms shook, and the force knocked their swords aside. The powerful force actually almost knocked the emperor armament out of Jian Chen's hand. At the same time, the terrifying sound wave turned into an invisible pushing force, so powerful that none of them could resist. It separated Jian Chen and Hao Wu, stopping them from fighting. Just as zither condensed from space could nullify the attacks of two great saint kings with a single note. Its power far exceeded anyone's imaginations. Jian Chen and Hao Wu did not continue their fight. They turned around to look at the zither as it slowly dispersed. Disbelief flooded their eyes. "It's the heavenly enchantress," Jian Chen murmured, as his heart began to churn. He recognized the zither condensed from space. It was the heavenly enchantress zither of the demonic cry. The appearance was the same. It had the same amount of strings and made the same sound. There was no one else in the world who could play the zither like that other than the heavenly enchantress. However, he had not imagined that the heavenly enchantress' strength would rise to such an unbelievable level after just a few years, which shocked Jian Chen greatly. Hao Wu carried Zarkayun as he levitated in the sky. He stared blankly at the zither, and his emotions became extremely mixed. Pain was present in his gaze. "Moor, is it you?" Hao Wu called out gently, but it resounded through a radius of several dozen kilometers. His voice trembled as it was filled with emotions. "Moor." Jian Chen immediately became shocked when he heard Hao Wu's words. Does he know the heavenly enchantress? Mua, is that the heavenly enchantress' name? The zither in the sky finally dispersed completely, but the heavenly enchantress never showed up. No one knew where she was. Was she still hiding, or had she left long ago? Tears pooled up in Hao Wu's eyes. He stared painfully at the spot that the zither had vanished from and sorrowfully said, "Moor, since you've come, why don't you want to come out and see your dad? It has been so long. Are you still unwilling to forgive Dad?" "Dad?" Jian Chen was shocking inside when he heard that. He turned to Hao Wu suddenly and stared at him fixedly. Surprise filled his face, as he doubted what he had just heard in that moment. Is that middle-aged man the father of the heavenly enchantress? Jian Chen was filled with disbelief, and he was unable to return to his senses. However, if that were the case, it would give an even better explanation to why the heavenly enchantress would secretly interfere. Rui Jin, Hong Lian, and He Yu also stared sternly at the space where the zither had disappeared. They remained silent. That little girl has become so powerful. She is actually able to move around tracelessly. Even I can't sense her presence. A while later, He Yu sighed emotionally. When we met her several years ago on Dragon Island, she was still a saint ruler. How did she become so powerful? Was she always hiding her strength before? If that's really the case, then her ability to conceal her abilities is just too great, Rui Jin murmured. He was still confused after much thought. That person is very powerful. Just a single note is enough for my soul to tremble. Do you recognize her? Hong Lian stared fixedly on the space where the zither had vanished. She was extremely stern. Rui Jin nodded and replied, I've met her before. She was with Jian Chen at that time. She uses the zither as a weapon, and uses sound to fight people. She walks an extremely rare path of cultivation, but I just never thought that she will become so powerful. Hao Wu. Zarkayun stared at Hao Wu emotionally as he carried her. She called out gently. Her purple dress had already become dyed red with blood, which made her seem extremely miserable. Hao Wu lowered his head to look at her. His expression became mixed. Kayun, how are you? Are you heavily injured? Hao Wu's voice was filled with concern. Zarkayun shook her head gently as tears ran down her cheek. Her voice was filled with tenderness and injustice. How Wu 3,000 years. After 3 whole thousand years, you're finally willing to come see me. Do you know how painful it has been in those years as I waited for you? How Wu painfully closed his eyes. His heart ached, and he said, Kaiyan, you're so silly. I'm not worth it for you to be like that. It's me who did not have the right to see you. It's me who can't make it up to you. I was the one who failed to live up to you. Kaiyan shook her head gently, as she said weakly, How Wu, did you know that although you've once made me suffer so much pain that I would be better off dead, I've never hated you. I knew the clan secretly organized it all. You only fell to the schemes of the seniors of my clan, suffering because of them. I only resented the seniors and only blamed them. I never blamed you. How Wu, did you know that I've always been waiting for you these years? Waiting for you to apologize to me and beg for my forgiveness. It's a pity that my wish never came true. I waited painfully for you for 3,000 years. Yet you didn't even want to come see me. Heartbreak filled Kaiyan's voice. Chapter 1035. Kaiyan's feelings. After Kaiyan buried her feelings in her heart for so long, they finally exploded without restraint. Her bone-piercing tenderness and her unchangeable stubbornness deeply moved How Wu's heart and caused it to tremble. Kaiyan, it was me who has no right to see you. I have no right to see you. I'm the one who can't make it up to you. It's me. How Wu sobbed painfully with his eyes closed, as sorrow filled his face as well. Bright blood constantly flowed from the corner of Kaiyan's mouth. She slowly raised her jade-white hand and gently touched How Wu's weathered face. Her eyes were no longer as cold and emotionless as before. Instead, tenderness filled her eyes. She said softly, How Wu, I don't blame you. I've never blamed you, nor have I been mad at you. Because back then, before my family, you had no power to resist. Even I could not avoid the arrangements of my family. But it's different now. We both possess great strength now. We both have the authority to speak and make decisions before the clan. How Wu, did you know that I longed for you in every moment of those years, longing to be with you, to spend our days freely like before and living by the sword? Are you willing to be with me now? Kaiyan stared stubbornly at How Wu as anticipation filled her. At that moment, the sky became abnormally silent. Other than the wild wind, there was only How Wu and Kaiyan's voice. All the saint rulers from the 8 clans flew over. They stood silently in the distance as they watched everything unfold. All of their expressions were extremely mixed, while quite a few of them stared fixedly at Kaiyan. Very few of the people among them knew about Kaiyan's past. They all found it extremely unbelievable that their most powerful ancestors' love for How Wu was so deep, and that it did not change even after several thousand years. Vamos stood with the many saint rulers of the Zar family, as they stared at the two of them with mixed emotions. Deep regret was present. Back then, they had ignored the painful pleas of Kaiyan and forcefully separated the two of them. This was because How Wu was just a slightly talented mercenary. He drifted through the continent without a definite residency and did not possess any background. How could someone like that catch the eyes of the Zar family that controlled one of the 7 capitals of the city? Meanwhile, Kaiyan was the most outstanding person of the family. She was talented, clever, and a devastating beauty. The previous ancestor of the clan viewed her as a treasure of the clan. They loved her dearly. But how could they let such an impressive clan member marry a mercenary that did not even have a home? As a result, a series of matters followed. However, the Zar family had never thought that the mercenary, who could only be considered as slightly talented, would actually have such great potential. He became one of the few supreme experts of the continent after several thousand years, and became an existence that the Zar family needed to treat with importance. However, the Zar family had just committed too many things that could not be made up to How Wu. With the mistakes already committed, it was extremely difficult for them to avoid the consequences, which was why How Wu had always stayed in the Holy Empire. However, his relationship with the Zar family was ambiguous. It was uncertain whether it was hostile or not. Also, Vamos knew that with How Wu's connections, he possessed the power to take revenge against the Zar family many years ago. However, he never did it, all because of Zarkayun. Jianchen put away his emperor armament and hovered in the sky without any presence like an ordinary person. He stared quietly at the two of them as mixed emotions filled his eyes. The light in his eyes flickered as he was thinking of something. Rui Jin, Hong Lian, He Yu, and the four protectors of the Bloodsword sect silently stood with Jianchen. Hao Wu closed his eyes painfully once more as he listened to Zarkayun. He did not reply even after a very long time. Zarkayun stared at him for a very long time before she became dejected. Tears rolled uncontrollably down her cheeks. Hao Wu, I know you still love me. You've always loved me, right? Hao Wu nodded his head gently without saying anything. The main reason why you're unwilling to be with me is because of your daughter, right? You're afraid that your daughter will never forgive you, right? Asked Zarkayun in a pained voice. I'm sorry, Kaiyan. Hao Wu rubbed Kaiyan's cheeks gently as pain filled his heart. Clearly, he had always been deeply in love with Zarkayun, but he could not be with his lover due to certain reasons. He had not even met her in 3,000 years. Zarkayun's lips curled into a smile as she slowly closed her eyes in a satisfied manner. She said gently, Hao Wu, I may not be able to be with you, but I am already very satisfied to be able to feel your embrace once more. With that, her body suddenly jolted. Immediately, blood sprayed from her mouth. She also began to pale, and her expression became horrible. She was close to death. Hao Wu's expression greatly changed. His eyes snapped open in that instant as he stared at Zarkayun in disbelief. He cried out, Kaiyan, what are you doing? You've severed your meridians to your heart. Why are you so muddle-headed? Since living means pain, I might as well just die. It'll be better than suffering every day. Hao Wu, I hope we can meet again in our future lives. Zarkayun's face was ashen. She wanted to die now and did not desire to continue living. Afterward, a faint ball of flames emerged from Zarkayun's head. She was currently using a secret technique to burn her soul. Kaiyan, don't do this. Hao Wu paled in fright. He became stunned as everything had occurred just too suddenly. Kaiyan, stop. Zarvamos also paled as he cried out in a panic. Ancestor! The saint rulers all became shocked as well as they called out sorrowfully. Jianchen's expression also changed slightly as he stood from afar. He turned to Rui Jin and said, Senior Rui Jin, please stop her. Rui Jin nodded and silently arrived before Zarkayun. He directly struck toward her head with his palm. Don't harm Kaiyan. Hao Wu thought that Rui Jin wanted to kill Zarkayun. He immediately tried to block the attack as he cried out. If you don't want her soul wiped out, don't interfere, Rui Jin growled. His left hand changed between seals, and he immediately cast a secret technique of the Dragon Clan to immobilize Hao Wu. His right palm continued mercilessly toward Zarkayun's head. Rui Jin immediately extinguished the flames on her head, and her soul stopped burning. Rui Jin had forcefully obstructed her suicide attempt, but her soul was greatly injured. She became unconscious. Hao Wu recovered his freedom very quickly. He retreated hastily with Zarkayun in his arms, and he pulled far away from Rui Jin. He stared at Zarkayun in panic as he constantly shook her. Kaiyan, what has happened to you? What has happened to you? Zarvamos also arrived before Hao Wu. His expression was filled with sorrow as he stared painfully at the unconscious Zarkayun. He was filled with regret over the decision he had made all those years ago. Her soul is currently extremely heavily injured, and she has fallen conscious. Coupled with the fact that she only wants to die, it'll be impossible for her to wake up in a short amount of time, Rui Jin said nonchalantly as he stared deeply at Zarkayun. Chapter 1036, Meeting Yongling Again 1. Kaiyan, you're so muddle-headed. You really are so muddle-headed. Why did you do something like this? Why? Hao Wu was torn with grief. He touched Zarkayun's pale face with his coarse hand. His heart ached. Zarvamos' face was streaked with tears. He too was in great sorrow when he saw the pained state of his great-granddaughter, since she was like this due to him. It was because of the matter all those years ago that led to the horrible relationship between him and Zarkayun. Sigh, I regret, Zarvamos said painfully. Zarkayun's state would severely affect the power of the clan. Kaiyun, wake up. Quickly wake up. I'll take you back home. To the home that belongs to us. We'll live the life we once had. Hao-Wu murmured quietly since he wanted to wake her up. However, Zart Sayun's eyes did not even twitch, as if she had not heard him at all. Hao-Wu, give Kaiyun to me. The Zar family will use everything we have to save her, Zarvamos said to Hao-Wu. A sharp light immediately flickered through Hao-Wu's sorrowful gaze when he heard that. He stared at Zarvamos in resentment and coldly said, Zarvamos, think about what you did all those years ago. What dignity do you have left to take Kaiyun from me? You don't even have that right. Zarvamos, if it weren't for Kaiyun, did you really think that your Zar family would have been able to be as carefree as it is now? Hao-Wu's words were like drenching Zarvamos in cold water. His entire body became cold as he stood there blankly. His soul seemed to have left his body. Then, Hao-Wu looked at Jianshen. He quickly glanced past Ruijin and Heiyu from the corner of his eyes. A sliver of fear appeared in the depths of his eyes as he said, Jianshen, Kaiyun is no longer a member of the Zar family. Now that she has fallen into such a miserable state, I hope you can wipe the slate between you and her. Any matters of the Zar family have nothing to do with. Does that satisfy you? Jianshen's expression was extremely mixed. He slowly nodded and said, Senior Hao-Wu, allow me to ask you one question. What is your relationship with the Heavenly Enchantress? Although Jianshen had already guessed that Hao-Wu was her father, he wanted to confirm it. Hao-Wu's face immediately darkened with that. He said dejectedly, She's my daughter, but she does not recognize me as her father. Hao-Wu became filled with pain when Jianshen mentioned the Heavenly Enchantress. His heart ached. Although he had known it would be like this beforehand, Jianshen still gasped inside after he learned this news from Hao-Wu personally. Jianshen calmed down very quickly. He slowly flew to Hao-Wu's side and stared at the unconscious Zar Kaiyun with mixed feelings. After hesitating slightly, Jianshen slowly closed his eyes. Immediately, a ball of extremely dense, milky white light began to radiate from Jianshen. It encased his entire body and obscured his appearance. Jianshen seemed to have become a radiant god that was bathing in the light. His stern expression was filled with a divine awe, as if he could not be impinged upon. This is the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force. I never thought he had already reached the 7th class. The president and grand elder of the Radiant Saint Master Union both cried out when they saw this. They were astounded. Although Jianshen had taken away the saint artifact of the Union, it was not easy for a Class 6, Radiant Saint Master, to become a Class 7, Radiant Saint Master. It was definitely unprecedented on the continent for someone at Jianshen's age to reach the 7th class. He really is a prodigy, though it's a pity. The president shook his head as he sighed. Pity flooded his face. Jianshen had personally used the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force to heal Zar Kaiyun. His decision regarding Zar Kaiyun was displayed through this action. Although he and the Heavenly Enchantress were not married, matters that only occurred after marriage had happened between them. The Heavenly Enchantress was Hao-Wu's daughter, while Hao-Wu and Zar Kaiyun were deeply in love with each other. Their deep affection had moved Jianshen. Jianshen had no idea just what had happened between the three of them to cause such a complicated situation, but just from their relationship on the surface, Jianshen was certain of his choice. If he continued his attempts on Zart Sayun's life, Hao-Wu would definitely fight him to the death. His relationship with Hao-Wu would also become one of hostility, which was not something Jianshen wanted to see. Also, the Heavenly Enchantress had secretly prevented the battle between the two of them, just as they were about to clash. Perhaps, the Heavenly Enchantress did not want to see her father fight with Jianshen in such a life-or-death fashion. He had learned from Hao-Wu that the Heavenly Enchantress had never recognized him as a father. But they were still father and daughter after all. The wound from Rue Jin's sacred dragon sword was rather severe. The powerful origin energy had devoured her flesh and formed a fist-sized hole. But with the regenerative properties of Radiant Saint Force origin energy, Jianshen only needed a single strand to completely heal Zar Kaiyun. However, she did not awaken. Jianshen's actions greatly moved Hao-Wu, and he constantly thanked Jianshen. He knew Jianshen's background very well. Jianshen was someone that even the 10 protector clans were helpless against. Moreover, He was followed by two extremely powerful experts that even human and magical beast saint emperors could do nothing but flee against. However, Hao Wu had no idea about the connection between Jian Chun and his daughter even now. I've healed all her wounds with my radiant saint force. Though I am helpless when it comes to the injuries of her soul, Jian Chun gently sighed. I will find ways to cure Caiyun's injuries of the soul. It's me who can't make it up to her, as well as me who caused her to become like this. I will use the rest of my life to make it up properly to Caiyun. Hao Wu focused his attention on Czar Caiyun's face. Then, he left with her in his arms. He disappeared into the horizon very quickly. Caiyun! Czar Vamos sorrowfully cried out as he stared blankly in the direction she had disappeared in. He was filled with worry and a deep unwillingness to part with her. At this moment, more and more saint rulers hurried over from the surroundings. They watched from afar. They had all been drawn over by the great battle earlier. Jian Chun casually glanced past the empty space up ahead. His soul was extremely powerful, so he could clearly feel the saint kings hiding there. Within them included the ancestor of the Kara clan. Jian Chun was no longer in the mood to settle his disagreements with the 8 clans and the Czar family after what had happened with Hao Wu. He coldly said to the people of the 8 clans, I will not pursue the matter of you heavily injuring me all those years ago because of Senior Hao Wu. You may have escaped death, but you have not escaped punishment. With that, all the saint rulers of the 8 clans relaxed. All of them revealed expressions of relief, like they had just escaped a disaster. What they feared the most was Jian Chun taking revenge for what had happened all those years ago, since they would be helpless if he actually took action. Jian Chun, my Qing family is filled with deep regret regarding what we did to you all those years ago. To thank you for not killing me, I will heavily injure myself as the price. To give brother Jian Chun an explanation, the saint ruler of the Chung family spoke first. He then punched himself in the chest. Blood sprayed from his mouth into the air as he became heavily injured. Afterward, the other saint rulers of the 8 clans all heavily injured themselves as well. They were paying the price for what they did all those years ago, as well as giving Jian Chun an explanation and thanking him for not killing them. This scene caused a great discussion to break out among those who were watching. They all began to whisper to one another. The enmity between Jian Chun and the 8 clans from all those years ago could be considered to have reached a complete conclusion. Although Hao Wu and Czar Caiyun disrupted Jian Chun's plans and made him deviate from them, it still could be considered a perfect conclusion. Then, Jian Chun arrived before the group of people from the Radiant Saint Master Union after he dealt with the 8 clans. He clasped his hands and said with mixed emotions, Jian Chun greets the President and the Grand Elder. Chapter 1037. Meeting Yang Ling again too. The President and the Grand Elder of the Radiant Saint Master Union both sighed deeply inside, as they looked at the person who was once the most outstanding prodigy of the Union. Their emotions were greatly mixed. Once upon a time, the two of them had treated Jian Chun as the future of the Radiant Saint Master Union. They even raised him as the successor of the President. The President had even used his own disciple, Yun Tian, to discipline Jian Chun, with the hope that he could grow quickly and become someone great that could take charge. He had hoped that Jian Chun could take up the position of developing the Union. Unfortunately, the heavens played a huge joke on them. The young Yutian who had joined the Union as a Radiant Saint Master all those years ago was a fighter as well, and one that had become Saint Ruler. Since ancient times, there had never been a fighter that was also a Radiant Saint Master. As a result, the saying that one could not be both a fighter and Radiant Saint Master at the same time had arisen. No one had ever broken this fact, even after the countless years the saying had existed. However, the revelation of Yang Yutian's identity as a fighter broke this fact that had remained for countless years and greatly affected the Union. It basically shook it to its core. Other than that, Jian Chun's other identity also greatly shocked the high-ranking members of the Union. He was actually a member of a protector clan, the Changyang clan. The protector clans were the ultimate force of the Tianyuan continent. They had existed since ancient times and possessed history even lengthier than Mercenary City. Even the three great empires possessed nothing close to contending with them. They were the undebatable rulers of the continent, and the radiant Saint Union was as weak as a child compared to them. They would crumble in the first clash if they were to ever fight. The president and grand elder of the Union looked at Jian Chun with extremely mixed emotions. They remained silent for a very long time while affection and resentment mixed within their eyes. To them, Jian Chun was someone worthy of their affection and resentment. They loved his talent as well as the fact that he could bring a bright future to the Union, while they hated Jian Chen's second identity. Moreover, he took away the saint artifact all those years ago and threatened the Union. They knew that Yang Yutian, who had become the most outstanding prodigy in all of the Union's history, and had extremely great potential of reaching Class 8 as a Radiant Saint Master, would probably never return again. Sigh. After a very long while, the Grand Elder exhaled deeply at the sky and said, Jian Chen, you've finally returned to the Tianyuan continent. I never thought that it would take several years before we met again. Your strength has increased once again, which is unbelievable. Jian Chen, come visit the headquarters of our union whenever you have the time. There are some matters I want to discuss with you. The president spoke as well. Jian Chen knew that the president wanted to talk about the saint artifact, so he did not decline. He agreed. President, I'll go with you to the union after I deal with the matters here. The president also began to smile from the bottom of his heart, as he nodded many times. Jian Chen used the illusory flash to move, and his steps became blurs. With every casual footstep, he would traverse several kilometers. Although Jian Chen did not go ahead and comprehend it purposefully, he had become more and more proficient with it after using the special movement battle skill many times. His grasp of it was currently improving unconsciously. After around a dozen steps, Jian Chen had traversed over 100 kilometers. He had returned to the City of God. The barrier around the city had disappeared as well. It had returned to its previous state. Rui Jin, He Yu, Hong Lian, and the four protectors of the Bloodsword sect followed behind Jian Chen. Behind them were Tsar Vamos and the saint rulers of the 8 clans, as well as the various experts who had come to watch. Jian Chen hovered over the City of God and directly flew to the mansion of the Tsar family. Bai Jian remained in the huge estate, standing there in the same position as before. Panic flooded his face. Tsar Vamos had frozen Bai Jian before, which had immobilized him. Although Tsar Kaiyun had snatched him away later, she did not remove the force that trapped him place. So all he could do was stand there obediently. He could not even flee even when he wanted to. Bai Jian, I'd like to see who will be saving you now. Jian Chen stared icily at Bai Jian. Powerful killing intent radiated from Jian Chen without any restraint. It caused the surrounding temperature to plummet. Bai Jian's expression immediately changed when he saw Jian Chen return safe and sound. He became absolutely horrified and fear flooded his face. Don't kill me, Jian Chen, don't kill me. I am great friends with the Heavenly Enchantress. If you kill me, the Heavenly Enchantress will never forgive you. She will hate you for the rest of her life. Bai Jian said with a trembling voice. He had already become pale white, since he knew he was facing the moment of his death. Bai Jian, if it were not for the experts of the Changyang clan arriving in time for the matter of Flame City, all my good friends probably would have died by your hands. And I have even heard that you were interested in my fiancée Yu, right? Jian Chen's gaze became even colder as killing intent boiled in his heart. No, that's not true, Jian Chen. That's not true. It's all a misunderstanding. Bai Jian paled in fright. He frantically denied the accusations and wanted to explain himself. Jian Chen was not convinced at all. He coldly said, Don't worry, Bai Jian, I won't kill you so easily. With that, Jian Chen threw a vicious kick at Bai Jian's dantian, and a sliver of chaotic force immediately entered it. The chaotic force destroyed his saint weapon, while his dantian completely collapsed. The powerful force had even crushed his organs into mush. Bai Jian produced an extremely miserable shriek. With his saint weapon destroyed, he also became extremely heavily injured. Although he would not die as long as his soul was still present as a saint ruler, his strength plummeted. Afterward, Jian Chen extended a finger, and a sliver of chaotic force shot into the center of Bai Jian's eyebrows in the form of a sharp sword qi. It heavily injured his soul, and prevented him from being able to flee in the form of a soul. Bai Jian immediately became haggard thanks to this soul injury. He arrived at death's door, and he even lost the power to shriek out in pain. He was in so much agony that tiny droplets of sweat covered his forehead. Jian Chun, you won't be dying an easy death, Bai Jian cursed through his teeth, but his voice was extremely weak. He knew he was done for now that Jian Chun had destroyed his saint weapon, and his soul was injured. Jian Chun ignored Bai Jian's cursing. He did not need to get mad at someone who was about to die. Then, he sucked Bai Jian into the artifact space, and left the Tsar family estate. Jian Chun gathered in a beautifully decorated room, with the president and grand elder on the very top floor. After a short talk, Jian Chun gained an even better grasp of the current union. A great uproar had indeed erupted in the upper echelon of the union, with the loss of the saint artifact, almost causing the union to collapse. In the end, they managed to emerge safely, all because of the secret assistance from the 3 great clans of the Holy Empire, which allowed the union to survive the disaster. The Radiant Saint Master Union was not a weak force. As long as they existed within the Holy Empire, they remained a force of the Holy Empire. This was why the 3 great clans did not wish to see the union collapse, since experts of the union would join other organizations, or the other 2 empires. This would strengthen their enemies. The union and the 3 great clans silenced the matter regarding the loss of the saint artifact to prevent it from spreading any further. Then, they announced some other reason to cover the truth. Jian Chun had even learned from the president and the grand elder that all the Radiant Saint Masters that placed in the top 10 last time had failed to reach class 7 other than him. This included Kara Liwei, the person known to be the greatest class 6, Radiant Saint Master. None of them fused with the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force successfully. Jian Chun, our union may have lost the saint artifact, but as long as the origin energy source in our possession doesn't run out, our union can continue existing. According to your request many years ago, we have been devoting all our efforts in finding items that can store the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force. We've gathered quite a few, and they're all in this space ring. I hope you can help us collect some more origin energy the next time the seal of the artifact loosens, the president pleaded. He knew that the existence of the current union would all be up to Jian Chun. If the union lost its source of Radiant Saint Force origin energy, it would no longer have the power to gather all the high-class Radiant Saint Masters of the continent. Jian Chun accepted the space ring. President, don't worry. I will definitely store enough origin energy for you the next time the seal loosens. I will be able to relax if that's the case. The president and the grand elder both became relieved. Their thumping hearts calmed down, and they became much more at ease. Jian Chun pondered in silence as he sat in the chair. Reminiscence filled his eyes. Scenes of when he was in the City of God as a Class 6, Radiant Saint Master flashed through his head again. At that moment, he remembered his bodyguard back then, Yang Ling. That fellow was even willing to throw his own life away to protect Jian Chun. There was also that chatterbox, Quan Yukai, who always stuck to him in an attempt to obtain the radiant arts. Yang Ling loyalty had once moved Jian Chun deeply. Although he was just a bodyguard, Jian Chun had never treated him as an outsider during the time he spent with him. He treated him as a friend, even though he was just a Heaven Saint Master. President, Grand Elder, may I meet my bodyguard from back then, Yang Ling? Jian Chun asked. It was impossible for the president to not fulfill Jian Chun's small request. He immediately sent people to contact Yang Ling. Then he smiled and said, there were 2 people of the top 10 from last time who succeeded a little in fusing with the origin energy. One of them was the chosen daughter of the Kara clan, Kara Liwei. The other was Quan Yukai, who you once knew. Quan Yotsai's talent is pretty impressive as well, possessing the potential to reach Class 7, so I assigned Yang Ling to protect him. Chapter 1038. Kara Liwei. Jian Chun had no idea how he should react when he heard this news. They had not seen each other for so many years. Yet Quan Yukai was actually with Yang Ling. Quan Yukai is shameless and feels unreliable sometimes. He would stick to me all the time and constantly chatter without end. While Yang Ling's a quiet person, he's simple and honest, so it sure would be interesting if the two of them are together, Jianchen thought inside. Very soon, the burly Yang Ling was brought over by some people, and following him was the white-robed Quan Yukai who bore a detailed, blue badge on his chest. Oh wow, Brother Yang Yutian, it really is you. When I heard the elders say that Brother Yang Yutian had come back for vengeance with the 8 clans, I didn't believe it at first, but it really is you now that I've seen you again. Quan Yotsai's eyes immediately lit up when he saw Jianchen. Joy filled his face, and he shot over to Jianchen's side, as if he had not even seen the president and grand elder. He walked around Jianchen as he examined him, asking in disbelief, Brother Yang Yutian, the elders can't be right, can they? Have you really come back to find revenge with the 8 clans? And that intense battle that just happened in the sky of the city can't have been you, right? The president furrowed his brows when he saw how Quan Yukai behaved. He chastised with a deep voice, Quan Yukai, do not be impolite to Brother Jianchen. Ah, teacher, grand elder, the two of you are here as well. Quan Yukai greets teacher and the grand elder. Quan Yukai only just seemed to have noticed the presence of the president and grand elder. He immediately stopped acting in such a joking manner, and greeted the two of them courteously. After failing to fuse with the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force, he was taken on as a student of the president. However, his identity was nowhere near as great as Jian Chun and Yin Tian from before, who were disciples of the president. His relationship with the president was more akin to teacher and student. Quan Yukai admired the president and grand elder greatly inside. He immediately became well-behaved before the two of them, standing to one side obediently and quietly. He would always stare at Jian Chun, wanting to say something, but holding back while the president and grand elder were present. Jian Chun also became cheerful when he saw his acquaintances of the past. Although Quan Yukai and Yang Ling could not be considered life-and-death comrades, they were still friends that had once accompanied him. Quan Yukai, let's talk about the old days later. Jian Chun smiled at Quan Yukai as he stood there obediently. Quan Yukai nodded firmly. He only gave a small reply, and did not say anything else, as he glanced at the president and grand elder in an annoyed manner. Jian Chun looked to Yang Ling. He examined him in detail. After being separated for 10 years, Yang Ling was exactly the same as before with no changes whatsoever. Yang Ling, it's been several years since we last met. How have you been in those years? Jian Chun smiled. Yang Ling's gaze toward Jian Chun was slightly mixed. He then clasped his hands at Jian Chun courteously. Yang Ling greets the esteemed Master Yang Yutian. I thank Master Yang Yutian for your concern. Yang Ling has been very well in the past few years. Yang Ling, you can just call me Jian Chun. Jian Chun is my real name, said Jian Chun. Yes, Master Jian Chun. Yang Ling clasped his hands as he replied. He was just as polite as before. Jian Chun sat back on a large, comfy couch as he stared at Yang Ling in interest. He said steadily, Yang Ling, have you ever hated me? Jian Chun treated Yang Ling with great importance. Yang Ling's status in Jian Chun's heart had far exceeded Quan Yotsai's, or even a few ordinary friends. Back then on the ferry on Fragrance River, he faced the assassination attempt of the 8 clans. Yang Ling was even willing to sacrifice his own life to protect Jian Chun and let him flee, which deeply touched Jian Chun. Yang Ling dares not. Yang Ling completely treated himself as a servant, possessing no pride as a heaven saint master. He spoke extremely politely. Yang Ling, do you still remember my promise back then? I once said to you that I will help you out given the chance. I will be following through with what I said now. Are you willing to follow me and become a saint ruler? Jian Chun swore. He was extremely confident in allowing Yang Ling reach saint ruler. Yang Ling's eyes immediately lit up when he heard about becoming a saint ruler. He ravished with joy, but the light in his eyes soon darkened. He glanced at the president of the union. The president chuckled. Yang Ling, to be able to follow Brother Jian Chun would be the greatest fortune you will ever come across in your life. Why don't you hurry to thank Brother Jian Chun? I believe you'll be very successful in the future with Brother Jian Chun's help, and become a supreme expert. Yang Ling behaved like he had just been pardoned from a crime. He became emotional and clasped his hands courteously to Jianchen. I thank Master Jianchen's kindness very much. Brother Jianchen, we'll give Yangling to you. From now on he is your person. The union will no longer interfere with anything he does. The president expressed his position on Jianchen once again. With Jianchen's current status and strength, the union could only obediently abide, even if he wanted to take someone away from the union. At that moment, a purple-badged elder walked into the room carrying an embroidered box. He directly made his way to the president and said, President, I have brought you the item you want from the treasury. The president accepted the box from the elder, and then slowly opened it. 3 white, fist-sized rocks lay peacefully inside. They were all cubes, and were transparent, like some type of high-quality jade. Brother Jianchen, these 3 rocks are known to us as flaming jadeite. It's an extremely rare rock on the continent, and cannot be found easily. Each piece is invaluable and extremely hard to find or purchase within the markets. The rock can store energy, and the power of the energy it can store depends on its quality. If a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler poured his power into it, even an ordinary person would be able to unleash a strike from a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler with the rock. This would apply to saint kings as well. The 3 flaming jadeites in my hand, right now are of the highest quality, and are completely able to store the power from a saint king at great perfection. Brother Jianchen is someone with a family, so I'd like to gift these 3 rocks to Brother Jianchen, hoping that it can help out Brother Jianchen a little. The president brought the box before Jianchen, before passing it to him. Jianchen could not help but think back to when he first took part in the competition within the artifact spirit after hearing the president's explanations. A Class 6, Radiant Saint Master of the Tsar family had brought in a wondrous rock from outside and used it to dish out the strike of a saint king. By the looks of it, the rock should have been a flaming jadeite that the president had just told him about. I thank the president for his grand gift. Jianchen did not turn it down. He happily accepted the 3 rocks. The rocks could store the power of saint kings at great perfection, which meant that even ordinary people could produce a strike equal to saint kings at great perfection with the rock, given that someone had poured energy into it beforehand. This was a valuable treasure to Jianchen. Jianchen stayed at the union for 1 whole day. He spoke a lot with the president and grand elder, and had even mentioned Yin Tian in their conversations. However, Jianchen learned that Yin Tian had disappeared. Even when they used a secret technique to scour the continent, they failed to find his tracks. By the time Jianchen left the union, the sun had already set and darkness had descended, filling the entire world. Everything had been blanketed by the darkness of night. Brother Jianchen, it's been 10 years since we last met, and who knows how long it will be until we meet again. Tonight, everything will be on me. I'd like to invite you to the most famous ferry of Fragrance River. Will brother give me that honor? Quan Yukai laughed. He had returned to his jolly mood like before once he left the union. Jianchen did not turn down Quan Yotsai's suggestion. He took a horse carriage to Fragrance River outside the city with Quan Yukai and the silent Yang Ling, as well as He Yu and Hong Lian. Rui Jin, on the other hand, had entered the saint artifact with the flaming jadeites Jianchen had obtained from the president to pour energy into them. Meanwhile, the 4 protectors of the Bloodsword sect had been dismissed by Jianchen. Jianchen could not help but close his eyes as he sat in the rocky carriage. In that moment, his heart had become tranquil, which rarely happened. He felt like he had returned to before, back to when he was an esteemed Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. That night, Quan Yukai had paid the price. He booked the most famous ferry of Fragrance River, costing him several 100,000 crystal coins. However, that was nothing to a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. The ferry rode through the wind and waves at night as gentle music played. Floating on the river, the 2 banks danced with lamp light as the sound of activity buzzed. This was the liveliest place every night, the place where aristocrats would gather. On the deck, Jianchen, Quan Yukai, and Yang Ling toasted and drank heartily. They talked about everything while even the cat-sized white tiger had been let out of the artifact spirit. It was currently tasting and eating the various delicacies on the table. Yu Yu remained in the artifact space, using many low-class magical beasts to increase her strength. She possessed the secret protection of the artifact spirit, so Jianchen did not worry about any dangers that would threaten her life. He Yu and Hong Lian had followed Jianchen along, but they had no interest in participating in something like this with their age. They sat at the rear of the ship, as they rested with their eyes closed. A white strike of light tore through the dark night sky, traveling to the ferry where Jianchen was. Afterward, it slowly landed on the deck. Jianchen, Quan Yukai, and Yang Ling all looked at the uninvited person. It was an alluring beauty in a white dress who seemed to be in her 20s. Yang Yutian, you've disappeared for 10 years. You finally decided to come back. The beauty smiled gracefully as she made her way elegantly up to Jianchen. I never thought that it would actually be Miss Kara Li Wei. Even after so many years, Miss Li Wei is still as beautiful as before with no change through the years. Jianchen smiled back at the lady. She was the young lady of the Kara clan, Kara Li Wei. Chapter 1039. The divine hall hidden at the bottom of the river. Kara Li Wei arrived before Jianchen with her eyes shining. She smiled. 10 years have passed in the blink of an eye. Your temperament has undergone a huge change. It is like you're a completely new person. Yang Yutian, 10 years later, I am still the me from before, while you have stopped being your past self long ago. Reminiscence clouded her beautiful eyes, as she seemed to recollect everything in the past. Jianchen smiled silently at Kara Li Wei's words, and he replied, Miss Li Wei really does like to joke. It may be 10 years since we last met, but I am still my old self, even if my status and strength differ from before. Quan Yukai and Yang Ling drank together. They understood what was going on, so they excluded Jianchen and refused to talk to him. However, they would glance at Jianchen and Kara Li Wei at times, purposefully or otherwise. Really? Kara Li Wei smiled. She extended her slender, white fingers and poured wine into an empty cup on the table. Then, she glanced at Jianchen and said, Since the current Yang Yutian is still the former Yang Yutian, do you still remember that in the artifact space, I saved you once? Of course I remember. At that time, I was caught in a tight encirclement within the artifact space. It was all because Miss Li Wei arrived in time. You kept a portion of enemies busy, which allowed me enough time to cast Judgment's sword and change the situation, Jianchen said with a smile. Then, how do you intend on paying me back for assisting you all those years ago? Her eyes glowed with an alluring light as she stared unblinkingly at Jianchen's weathered face. She slightly smiled. When the seal of the saint artifact loosens in 40 years, I will do everything I can to assist Miss Li Wei in breaking through. Does this satisfy Miss Li Wei? I hope the esteemed Yang Yutian does not break his promise and upsets me. Kara Li Wei quietly responded in a delicate and touching fashion. Afterward, she raised her cup to Jianchen and said, Come Yang Yutian, I want to toast you a cup for my successful breakthrough to Class 7 in 40 years' time. Kara Li Wei brought the cup of wine close to Jianchen's lips. She stared at him with a slight flush on her beautiful face. Jianchen had even caught a whiff of her faint fragrance from her fingers. The smell was intoxicating. Kara Li Wei was a beauty that outshined the moon. If Jianchen did not possess a tough mental fortitude, he would have let down his guard long ago. Jianchen chuckled as he accepted the cup of wine from Kara Li Wei. Then he downed it completely. Yang Yutian, is the wine good? Kara Li Wei suddenly asked, as her eyes continued to shine. This wine is valuable, so of course it's... Jianchen replied subconsciously. However, before he could finish his words, Kara Li Wei suddenly leaned forward. She kissed Jianchen with her cherry-red lips. Jianchen was caught off guard. He had never thought that Kara Li Wei would do something like this, and he immediately became stunned. However, he returned to his senses very soon. Their lips separated, and Kara Li Wei blushed. She slowly backed away with a slight smile. Spurt. Quan Yukai suddenly spat out a mouthful of wine, while he was drinking heartily with Yang Ling. All of it landed on Yang Ling's face, as he too became stunned. Yang Ling used his clothes to wipe his face, before looking at Quan Yukai in confusion. Master Quan Yukai, why have you spat all the wine onto my face? It's such a pity for such good wine. Miss Li Wei, you. Jianchen was astounded, as he stared blankly at Kara Li Wei. Caroline giggled. Her smile was charming, while her blush deepened. She said, Yang Yutian, you must always remember that you owe me the most important thing. With that, dense radiant saint force suddenly began to condense into a cloud beneath Caroline. She did not stick around. Instead, she stepped onto the cloud and left the ferry. She made her way to the riverbank. Yang Yutian, I might as well pass on a message from the ancestor of my clan. The Kara clan wishes to be eternal friends with you. Caroline's voice rang through the sky. As her voice subsided, she disappeared into the darkness as well. Jianshan, what are you waiting for? Go chase her. She's about to run away. Quan Yukai put down his cup and frantically called out to Jianshan. He was panicking. Jianshan looked in the direction that Caroline had disappeared. He shook his head with a forced smile and gently sighed. Come, let's keep drinking. My God, you missed such a good opportunity. If you chased her, nothing would have been impossible. Regret filled Quan Yukai. Caroline's appearance was only a small deviation from their plans. They returned to their previous state very quickly, continuing to heartily drink and talk. At that moment, the tight-robed Yu stood in a grassy plain within the artifact's space. Beside her lay a 5-meter-long blue wolf, littered with sword slashes. There had been bloodshed, and it had stopped breathing long ago. Yu wiped away the sweat on her forehead as she stood before the wolf's corpse. She murmured, Why do I suddenly feel so uneasy? After a period of silent thought, she called out to the empty space, Artifact spirit. This one greets the mistress. What does the mistress require? The artifact spirit appeared beside Yu out of nowhere. It was extremely polite, as if it was talking to Jianshan. Send me out of here, Yu said to the artifact spirit. Yes, mistress, replied the artifact spirit. He immediately contacted Jianshan. After he gained Jianshan's approval, he let Yu out. Yu's appearance on the ferry naturally piqued Yang Ling and Quan Yotsai's curiosity. As a result, Jianshan introduced Yu to them before continuing to drink. Yu changed into a white dress in the ship's hold, regaining her elegance and nobility as a princess. Afterward, she sat quietly next to Jianshan and helped refill his cup. She did not speak a lot. At that moment, Hong Lian and He Yu's expressions changed. They sat at the rear of the ship. Both of their eyes suddenly snapped open. Then they leaped to their feet. A gleam of light flashed in their eyes as they glared at the surface of the river. There's something wrong with the river, Hong Lian said with a deep voice. Her eyes were dyed red at that moment, as if flames rolled within them. At that moment, her eyes seemed to be able to penetrate the void and see through all illusions. A while later, she became surprised. She said with a deep voice, How is that possible? How can a divine hall hide at the bottom of the river? What? A divine hall? He Yu was also surprised as disbelief filled his face. Hong Lian nodded as she stared fixedly at the bottom of the river. The divine hall has been sealed at the bottom, which concealed all of its presence. Now that the seal has eroded with time, the divine hall is currently breaking free and floating to the top. As soon as Hong Lian finished speaking, the peaceful surface of the river suddenly began to churn. Huge bubbles emerged like boiling water. The entire river began to rise at a visible rate, flowing onto the banks of the river very quickly. Chapter 1040. The bright moon divine hall. As the water quickly rose, the deck below Jianshan no longer remained stable. It began to violently rock. This sudden occurrence sort of surprised Jianshan and the others. They immediately stopped drinking. Quan Yotsai's face twitched, and he instantly sobered up. The ferry started to rock more and more violently, which made it harder and harder to keep upright. The drinking table on the deck also began to violently tremble, as various dishes crashed onto the deck. What's happening? Why is the ferry suddenly rocking so violently? Are we capsizing? Quan Yukai called out. He looked around with interest. The current situation confused him. Yang Ling immediately became alert, and his drunkenness vanished as well. His eyes shone as he glared around, prepared for battle at any moment. Yu hugged Jianshan's arm, but she seemed calm. It was like she would be safe even if the sky collapsed as long as she was by Jianshan's side. Jianshan slowly put down his wine cup as he nonchalantly stood on the deck. He expanded his presence, which quickly reached into the water. However, Jianchen became surprised very quickly. Disbelief flooded his face, as he said to Quan Yukai and Yang Ling, "Leave the ferry and contact the sailors of the ship. Tell them to dock to the side immediately." With that, Jianchen took to the sky with Yu Yu and flew 100 meters into the air. Although Quan Yukai and Yang Ling were completely clueless about the current situation, they needed to follow Jianchen's instructions. The two of them immediately ran below deck to contact the sailors. Then they took to the sky as well and left the ferry. He Yu and Hong Lian also took to the air and reached an altitude of 100 meters from the rear of the ship. They gathered with Jianchen and looked down at the surface of the river. The water of Fragrance River climbed higher and higher. It had already flowed over the banks and flooded into the distance. At this moment, the water levels alarmed all the people on the two sides. Some stronger people began to use their various abilities and climbed the trees around them. The ferries in the center of the river also began to slowly tip and sank one by one. The sailors on the boats had all leaped off. They were currently swimming toward the banks in confusion and alarm. Splash! Suddenly, a huge splash exploded, which created a huge ripple that was over 1,000 meters wide. In that instant, a silvery white divine hall slowly broke through the water. As it flickered with light, it surged into the sky as water surged off of it. Everything unfolded on a grand scale. What is this thing? Quan Yukai was struck dumb. He stared at the silvery white divine hall as it rose into the air. Shock filled his face. Yang Ling, who hovered beside him, also became wide-eyed. They could not recognize the divine hall with their current level of knowledge. The divine hall shot into the air while emitting a hazy silver light. A sacredness permeated the hall, as it lit up the dark night sky to the point where it seemed like daytime. The noisy banks became quiet in that instant. Everyone stared blankly at the divine hall that was growing, as it rose into the sky. No one paid any more attention to the water that had suddenly risen. The divine hall was 1,000 meters long and several hundred meters tall. The craftsmanship was exquisite and perfect. It seemed like a flawless piece of art. The divine hall rose to an altitude of 10 kilometers before it stopped. It radiated with a pressure that spread out in all directions in a blanketing manner. All the energy of the world became docile before it. This alerted all the ancestors of the 8 clans, the experts of the Tsar family, and the people of the Radiant Saint Master Union. When they raised their heads and saw the thumb-sized divine hall that hovered in the air, they immediately became interested. Without any hesitation, they all shot into the air as fast as they could and made way to the divine hall. At the same time, many experts in various places of the continent sensed the divine hall as well. They all came out of seclusion and traveled toward the city of God. I never thought that there would be divine hall hidden at the bottom of Fragrance River. This is unbelievable. Jianchen murmured to himself as he stared at the divine hall in the air. Afterward, he charged toward it with Yu Yu in his arms while He Yu and Hong Lian followed close behind. Quan Yukai stared at the divine hall in interest, as he said with marvel, "Looks like it's really true that there can never be anything too strange. I never thought that a house could fly and even fly so high. This sure has broadened my horizons today. Yang Ling, let's go up there and have a look." Quan Yukai and Yang Ling did not fall behind either, and they tailed Jianchen into the sky. There were quite a few Heaven Saint Masters on the banks of the river. As such, even more Heaven Saint Masters took to the air as soon as Quan Yukai and Yang Ling followed Jianchen. They used the energy of the world to levitate and created colorful lights that flickered in the sky. The sight was enchanting. Jianchen arrived at the same altitude as the divine hall with Yu Yu. The two of them stared fixedly at it. The 4 words Bright Moon Divine Hall hung on a great big board above the main entrance. The appearance of the divine hall had raised quite a large commotion. Figures constantly flickered through the surroundings, and saint rulers had already arrived at the main entrance. There were a few saint rulers from the Union and the Tsar family besides the ancestors of the 8 clans. The faces of all the saint rulers from the 8 clans were pale and haggard. Clearly, they still had not fully recovered from their self-mutilation earlier in the day. The Bright Moon Divine Hall. I never thought that it would actually be the Bright Moon Divine Hall. A cry rang out from nearby. An old man in simple robes stared at the bright divine hall, as all the people from the Radiant Saint Master Union gathered behind him. To no surprise, the president and grand elder were present as well. When Jianchen saw the old man, his eyes froze. He could not help but think back to the old man cleaning furniture. Jianchen had initially met this man in the Radiant Saint Tower. At that time, the old man was still a mysterious expert that Jianchen could not see through. But now, Jianchen could clearly see the old man's strength. He was a third heavenly layer Saint King that had just broken through. The president sighed deeply and said, "It's recorded that 50,000 years ago, Fairy Haoyu was possibly the most beautiful person in the world. She also possessed unprecedented, exceptional talent. She used just 2,000 years to reach the peak of Saint Emperor, and was only a paper-thin margin away from surpassing Saint Emperor. But it is a pity. She failed to overcome this margin, and was stuck there for over 7,000 years. In the end, she still failed to escape the limits of life, and passed away in meditation, helplessly and regretfully. It's really just a female way to say the gender-neutral immortal, except Haoyu here isn't really immortal, because she passed away. This is why I stuck with fairy, albeit a translation I dislike. Also, Haoyu means bright moon, so the divine hall actually has the same name as the person. I used an English translation for the divine hall, since it's more like a title, while the Haoyu and fairy Haoyu is likely to be her name. It's said that the cultivation method fairy Haoyu used was extremely wondrous. It used the essence of moonlight. When cultivating at night, the whole process of absorption is clearly visible. It's a cultivation method that surpasses the saint tier, and anyone who uses it to cultivate will be able to improve at astonishing speeds, added the Grand Elder. It's indeed mentioned in the records like that, but it's a pity that only females can use the cultivation method, said the president. With that, Jianchen's eyes immediately lit up. He seemed to beam slightly. At that moment, the surrounding space began to ripple violently. Space gates appeared one after another as Saint Kings stepped out with tremendous presences. They all stared at the divine hall, gasping uncontrollably. Jianchen glances over all the Saint Kings, and he saw the people of the 10 protector clans. Included was an expert from the Pure Heart Pavilion, and one from the Changyang clan. However, Jianchen did not know the name of the Changyang clan expert, even though he had seen him before. I never thought that it would be the bright moon divine hall of the famed fairy Haoyu from 50,000 years ago. It's said that the divine hall was built from some wondrous crystals from the moon, and that the fairy spent 1,000 years traversing to and fro collecting them. Not only is the divine hall extremely tough, it possesses moonlight force, said a knowledgeable expert from the 10 protector clans, as they marveled in wonder. Chapter 1041, Saint King Killing Formation, 1. More and more people gathered around the bright moon divine hall. Not only did quite a few Saint Kings come, a lot of Saint Rulers arrived as well. There was also some Heaven Saint Masters in Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters, who stood on a milky white light. A capital city of the continent was a place where experts gathered. Fragrance River was just outside the City of God, which was why many experts were drawn over immediately when the divine hall broke its seal. A few people with certain backgrounds even used secret techniques to communicate with the experts of their family and their powerful friends, informing them of the current events here. So this object is called a divine hall, something a Saint Emperor crafted. No wonder it's so wondrous and can fly to such a high place. Quan Yukai and Yang Ling arrived behind Jianchen, as they marveled at the divine hall that shone with hazy light. The material of this divine hall really is extremely special. It can actually absorb moonlight and transform it into its own power. Haoyu stared at the divine hall in wonder. Jianchen's eyes froze when he heard that, and only after a period of close observation did he notice that the divine hall had indeed absorbed a sliver of moonlight from the night sky. The moonlight was so faint. If he did not look closely, he would not be able to sense it at all. A sliver of reminiscence appeared in Hong Lian's eyes as inherited memories flashed through her head. They're right. This bright moon divine hall is indeed created from special materials from the moon. There are records regarding this material in my inherited memories. Hong Lian paused and raised her head up toward the moon in the sky. This is because in the ancient times, a saint emperor of my divine phoenix clan flew off to the moon. However, she took much more time than Fairy Hao Yu, taking up 4,000 years for a round trip. Jianchen immediately became astounded when he heard these words. He subconsciously looked toward the moon in the sky and sighed emotionally. I never thought that we would be so far away from the moon, that it would take 1,000, or even several thousand years for saint emperors to reach there. This is unbelievable. The moon is indeed a place that people rarely set foot upon. Even in the ancient times when there were the most saint emperors, very few people were willing to spend that much time to fly to the moon, because space gates cannot be created in outer space. The only way to the moon is by flying over slowly, said Hong Lian. The divine hall must possess the cultivation method of Fairy Hao Yu. Although only females can use it, if you give it to those talented female clansmen, once we take it back, their future accomplishments will be unlimited. The eyes of the experts from the protector clans, and a few saint kings of other organizations shone, as they stared at the divine hall with obvious greed. Even if you ignored the value of the material used to build the divine hall, just the cultivation method was enough to cause the people from the protector clans to drool. This was a cultivation method that surpassed Saint Tier. Even the protector clans that had existed since the ancient times did not have such a great cultivation method. At this moment, the people of the protector clans began to move before everyone else. They either flew toward the divine hall themselves, or with a few Saint Ruler juniors. Only the middle-aged man from the Pure Heart Pavilion remained still, as he was the only person who the divine hall did not tempt out of everyone present. The people of the protector clans were like flares. As soon as they began to move, the saint kings from ancient families or other large organizations began to move as well. They quickly approached the divine hall. The saint rulers in the surroundings all hesitated, as they levitated in the air. Before the saint kings, they had nothing to contend against them as mere saint rulers. Even if they came across treasures, they would not be able to beat the saint kings to take it for themselves. Instead, they might even face life-threatening danger. However, not all the saint rulers feared death. After a while of hesitation, someone finally gave in to their expanding desires, as he flew toward the divine hall even with the dangers ahead. However, his actions deeply influenced other people, which immediately led to more and more saint rulers flying toward the divine hall. Even a few Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters and Heaven Saint Masters followed behind them all. Quan Yu Kai Yong Ling, it'll be dangerous inside. You two should stay outside and not take part, Jianchen said to the two of them, before flying toward the divine hall with Yu Yu in his arms. He Yu and Hong Lian followed closely behind him. Sai looks like a fierce struggle is bound to happen. However, the new master of the divine hall seems to have already been secretly determined, said the Saint King of the Pure Heart Pavilion. He glanced at the nearby Jianchen. When he saw He Yu behind him, an obvious sliver of fear appeared in his eyes. Afterward, he ripped open a space gate and left. He had no plans in interfering with the matter of this divine hall. The ancestors of the 8 clans all hung in the air with their pale faces. They stared deeply at the people who flew toward the divine hall, as regret filled their faces. We're already heavily injured. We don't have the ability to take part in the struggle for the divine hall at all. So let's return, said a saint ruler of the 8 clans, before leaving first with a face full of regret. The other saint rulers all sighed inside. Then they left dejectedly as well. They all returned to the city of God. Jianchen arrived at the main entrance of the divine hall with the crowd. Yu Yu was still in his arms. He hid within the mass of people. Bang! 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 A few muffled sounds rang out from ahead. The people from the protector clans at the very front had already opened the closed door of the divine hall. The heavy, stone door slowly opened with a series of rumbles. Immediately, a cold stream of air surged wildly from within. It was almost bone-chilling and gave off a bleak feeling, which shocked everyone present. This is Moonlight Force, called out a Saint King from among the people of the protector clans. Moonlight Force is not Saint Force, so it indeed possesses odd characteristics. No wonder, Fairy, how you became the most powerful Saint Emperor back then. It probably has a close connection to this unique moonlight force, other than her own strength, someone suggested. All the people stepped on the floor made from the crystals of the moon, as they slowly made their way inside. After they passed through the main entrance, an extremely vast space appeared before them. In the center of the space stood a 100-meter-tall stone tablet. There were words clearly carved into it. Saint Emperors and Saint Kings are forbidden from entering the Divine Hall, or you will be responsible for the consequences. All the Saint Kings revealed rather horrible expressions when they saw this simple message, although the warning of the tablet seemed to be filled with confidence and arrogance, where it dared to even look down on Saint Emperor. None of the Saint King present dared to not keep the warning in mind. The owner of the Divine Hall was the fairy Hao Yu. She had reached the peak of Saint Emperor after all, someone who was only inches away from surpassing Saint Emperor. On the other hand, the Saint Rulers and Heaven Saint Masters all became excited. They were all ecstatic, as they internally praised the heavens for being fair. I never thought that the Divine Hall would only allow people below Saint King to enter, barring the entry of Saint Kings and Saint Emperors. Fairy, how you must have set up a formation to deal with Saint Kings and Saint Emperors inside, a Saint King of an ancient clan said with an ugly expression. It has been several tens of thousand years since Fairy Hao Yu's era. The formation must be far weaker than it was before. Do we really need to fear with so many people? Shouted a blue-robed old man loudly and courageously. Fairy Hao Yu may be the strongest Saint Emperor back then, and possessed terrifying strength. But wouldn't it become a joke if we were scared off just by some words on a tablet? Another middle-aged man added. He showed no intentions of backing off. Chapter 1042, Saint King Killing Formation 2. You're right. If so many people are frightened to the point where we would shy away just because of a tablet, would we still have any dignity to move around on the continent? I, Guanba, will be entering the Bright Moon Divine Hall no matter what today. I'd like to see the abilities of the former strongest Saint Emperor, Fairy Hao Yu, and how great they are. Can she use a mere Divine Hall to kill a Saint King? Said a burly, scar-faced middle-aged man. All the Saint Kings reacted to these words. The fear in their eyes disappeared, and they became determined. They were not mindless. Since they were able to become Saint Kings, life and death situations had tempered each and every one of them. They had stepped over countless corpses and climbed out from mountains of bodies. How would they fear death? Also, Saint Kings were people who stood on the very apex of the continent, so they naturally had their pride. How could they bear with the fact that just some words scared them away? Looks like it's going to be quite entertaining here. At this moment, clear laughter rang out from behind. Another striking Saint King had entered the Divine Hall. He looked roughly 30 years old, and was extremely handsome. He possessed a scholarly elegance, where all his movements carried great grace. Beside him was a white-dressed, devastating beauty. Caroliwei. Jianchen became slightly stunned when he saw her. He had not thought that Caroliwei had actually returned, and would come back to the Divine Hall. Afterward, Jianchen glanced toward the middle-aged man who stood beside her. His gaze immediately froze. He recognized this man as well. It was the ancestor of the Kara clan that he had met in the imperial palace of the Qinhuang kingdom back then. Kara Lot, I thought you wouldn't come. I didn't think you'd actually bring the treasure of your clan as well. A heavy voice boomed from the crowd. An ordinary-looking, middle-aged man in tight robes spoke to the ancestor of the Kara clan. Kara Lot laughed and said, "A Divine Hall has appeared. This is quite a matter on the continent, enough to make all the Saint Kings fight to the point of death for it. If I have enough luck, I can take the Divine Hall for myself, which will also benefit the clan greatly." Kazda Jinxiong, why would you think I wouldn't come when there's such a good opportunity? The middle-aged man was the ancestor of the Kazda clan, which was one of the 3 great clans of the Holy Empire. Then Carolot looked toward Jianchen and smiled. I never thought that Brother Jianchen would be here as well. Fantastic. If Brother Jianchen does not mind, I'm willing to travel with Brother Jianchen, as well as let Liwei broaden her knowledge in the meantime. Does Brother Jianchen mind? Caroliwei had also discovered Jianchen in the crowd. She could not help but think of what had happened earlier on the ferry. which caused her face to blush slightly. When she had left the ferry before, she had already left the city of God with the ancestor of the clan, but she never imagined that the bright moon divine hall would break out as soon as they arrived home. The great activity alarmed Kara a lot, who forced her to come back with him. The Qinhuang kingdom was a subsidiary of the Kara clan, while Jianchen was an imperial protector of the Qinhuang kingdom. As a result, he stood with the Kara clan. In other words, Jianchen had no reason to turn down Kara Lot's request. He agreed straightforwardly before beginning to talk to Kara Lot. Kara Liwei also recovered her previous state. She arrived at Jianchen's side with a beaming smile. Then she chattered with Yu as she held her hand. They got along well very quickly and giggled from time to time. Xiangtian, I never thought that you're here as well. This is fantastic. We can travel together as great-grandson and great-grandfather. And I can use that time to introduce you to some matters of the Protector clan, so that you can have some understanding. The great elder of the Changyang clan also arrived beside Jianchen. Although he was amiable, he stressed great-grandson and great-grandfather when he mentioned it. Jianchen did not become particularly joyful when he saw this great-grandfather, whose name he did not even know. All he did was agree indifferently, before devoting his attention elsewhere. Jianchen did not have any great impressions of the people within the Protector Changyang clan besides Changyang Zuyinshao and his wife. Deep within, he did not even accept the fact that he was a member of the Protector clan. The great elder from the Protector clan slightly furrowed his brows when he saw Jianchen's indifferent attitude. He revealed a sliver of displeasure, but he did not say anything more. The people gathered within the divine hall slowly made their ways into the depths. However, some people seemed to have broadcasted the warning on the table, which caused the saint rulers and heaven saint masters, who had initially decided not to take part, to surge into the divine hall as well. The people within constantly increase. At the same time, the news of the divine hall and the warning of the tablet spread through the continent like wildfire. It made many experts green with greed, as even more saint rulers and heaven saint master used various methods to make their way to the city of God from all directions. A great group of people was currently making their way into the depths of the divine hall in a bold fashion. A large number of heaven saint masters and a few saint rulers would enter every room and hall they passed. The group of people gradually dispersed. A few heaven saint masters and saint rulers ran off to find their own fortunes, while only the saint kings remained gathered together. They steadily advanced into the depth with a cautious and vigilant fashion. They ignored the surrounding rooms. Brother Jianchen, the most valuable thing here is the cultivation method fairy how you left behind. But treasures like that can only be obtained from the very depths of the hall. It definitely won't be outside, the ancestor of the Kara clan explained to Jianchen. He passed on the experience and knowledge he had accumulated over several thousand years to Jianchen, while Kazda Jianxiong would add in a few things from time to time as well. Their intentions for friendship were self-explanatory. The group of them arrived in a huge square, where the ceiling was 100 meters above. A huge sculpture stood in the center of the place. It depicted a lady who seemed to be around 20 years of age. Her white clothes made her seem sacred, while her hair was draped on her shoulders. She was extremely pretty, like a goddess from beyond the heavens. She did not seem like an existence that would be present in a mortal realm. This sculpture is undoubtedly Fairy Hao Yu. Fairy Hao Yu sure is a lady worthy of being known as a fairy. She really does look like an otherworldly fairy. Fairy Hao Yu's talent is unprecedented, reaching the peak of Saint Emperor at such a young age. She became the strongest among the Saint Emperors, though it's a pity that she couldn't overcome the final obstacle and break through. She passed away like that. What a pity, what a pity. Many of the Saint Kings stared at the sculpture with mixed emotions as they discussed. Various emotional sighs and sounds of regret mingled together to form a hubbub. Fairy Hao Yu sure is an unparalleled beauty. Jianchen stared at the sculpture in a daze as well, as he murmured. Fairy Hao Yu's beauty had completely exceeded the level where it could be praised as devastating. Only the heavenly enchantress could be compared to her out of all the people he had met. At this moment, something suddenly happened. An extremely dense killing intent suddenly appeared. which filled the entire divine hall. It was bone-chillingly cold, and as soon as it appeared, it invaded the bodies of Saint Kings, worming its way into their bone marrow. It seemed to have frozen the center of their bones, and even Jianshan was unable to avoid it. All the Saint Kings present revealed extremely horrible expressions. Afterward, surging saint force gushed out from within their bodies in an attempt to resist the invasion of the chilling killing intent. Chapter 1043, Saint King Killing Formation 3. In a grand fashion terrifying, surging energy erupted in the square within the divine hall. The energies from all the Saint Kings coiled together and immediately transformed into an extremely great force that flooded the surroundings. It knocked all the Saint Rulers and people below Saint Rulers far away. The Heaven Saint Masters in Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters were affected especially heavily. They all vomited blood as they flew backward. They were all heavily injured, while the fragile Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters had suffered even worse injuries. Jianchen, Heiyu, Honglian, Carolot, Kazdajianxiong, and the great elder of the protector Changyang clan gathered together. They all knew Yu and Jianchen's relationship, so they all worked together without explicit communication to create an energy barrier around Yu and Kara Liwei, which prevented the two of them from being harmed in any way. This should be a method fairy, how you left behind to deal with Saint Kings in particular. Get the two of them far away from us first, so that we can move without worry. Otherwise, it'll be very hard for us to take care of them once we come across true danger, growled the great elder of the Changyang clan. Brother Jianshan, what do you think? Carolot looked toward Jianshan. Sure. Jianshan hesitated slightly, before directly striking the protective barrier around Yu and Kara Liwei. He knocked the two of them far away. The killing intent here is rapidly becoming stronger. If it continues like this, probably even Saint Kings at great perfection will struggle to resist it. This killing intent is odd. It's not purely killing intent. There seems to be something else within it. Once it invades our bodies, it'll wreak havoc like maggots in the bone. Let's advance faster and pass through this region, everyone called out. Afterward, they all used their surrounding saint force to resist the invasion of the killing intent. They continued toward the depths of the divine hall step by step. However, the deeper they traveled, the denser the killing intent became. Some first heavenly layer Saint Kings even began to struggle with resisting the killing intent. Jianshan did not emit energy like everyone else. He created a protective barrier on the surface on his body to resist the killing intent and expanded the chaotic force within him to fill every inch. He completely utilized the advantages of the chaotic body, which made resistance even easier. The weird killing intent permeating the divine hall could not break through his body's defenses at all. Jianshan looked around at the others, and a sliver of suspicion appeared on his face. Even Saint Kings found it rather difficult to resist this killing intent, let alone Saint Rulers. If Saint Rulers had entered this region, they would definitely fail to resist the invasion of the killing intent and die. They would not be able to pass through the place. So why did Fairy How You leave such a warning on the tablet? Perhaps Fairy How You just didn't want the divine hall she spent so much effort into crafting to fall into the hands of others, which was why she cast down this killing formation here, to prevent the entry of Saint Kings and Saint Emperors. And that it's not that those below Saint King can enter the divine hall safely, but their strength is just too weak, so they do not catch the fairy's attention? Maybe that was why she did not explain it on the tablet. Jianshan analyzed inside. He already began to doubt whether everyone had misinterpreted the tablet. If the killing formation did not affect those below Saint King, why would he be faced with the attacks of such a powerful killing intent? After all, his comprehension remained at the 7th heavenly layer of Saint Ruler. Only his prowess in battle reached the level of Saint Kings. At this moment, a barrier silently appeared. It was extremely large and not a normal white. Instead, it was a silvery moonlight condensed from moonlight force. It filled the entire hall and enveloped Jianshan's group, as well as the Saint Rulers and Heaven Saint Masters behind. Moonlight force immediately began to surge within the barrier. It condensed into countless sword chi that fell like rain that traveled toward all the people within the area with unbelievable speed. This included the Saint Rulers, Heaven Saint Masters, and Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters. With this, Yu Caroliway and the other experts all changed drastically in expression. Despair filled the eyes of many people. This was an ability from a formation a Saint Emperor cast down, so its strength was self-evident. How could they resist it? Crap. Jian Chen's expression changed drastically. He used the illusory flash and shot toward Yu at his greatest speed. At the same time, the Saint artifact shot out from the center of his eyebrows and transformed into a huge golden tower in the blink of an eye. It shot toward Yu and wanted to approach her. Then it could suck her into the artifact's space. If the Saint artifact wanted to suck away someone, it needed to be within a suitable proximity. However, the Moonlight Force Sword Chi were just too fast, much faster than Jian Chen and the Saint artifact. Before they could even approach Yu, the Sword Chi had struck. Where? Jian Chen cried out. He was utterly enraged and filled with regret. If he had known earlier, he would have sucked Yu into the artifact's space long ago. At the same time, Jian Chen shook violently. Over 10 Sword Chi had struck him at the same time, but they were only as strong as attacks from Saint Kings of the first heavenly layer. It could not break through the defense of his chaotic body, so they splattered apart like eggs as soon as they struck him. They recondensed into Moonlight Force and did not disperse. Jian Chen also arrived beside Yu. However, just when he wanted to send her into the artifact's space, he suddenly became stunned. He stared blankly at Yu as disbelief flooded her face. Yu stood there with panic in her eyes. Yet she was completely fine. She was unharmed. You are fine? Jian Chen asked in surprise. He had personally experienced the power of the Sword Chi, and every single one of them was as powerful as a strike from a first heavenly layer Saint King. An attack like that was extremely fatal to someone with Yu's level of strength. Caroliway also stood there, still badly shaken. She could not help but break into laughter when she saw just how much concern Jian Chen had for Yu. She patted her chest and said, "Yang Yutian, I never thought that you'd care for your fiancé so much. Don't worry, we're fine." Yu warmed up inside when she saw Jian Chen's expression. She smiled sweetly and said, "Jian Chen, don't worry. I'm fine. The Sword Chi from before doesn't seem to be able to harm us. Remember the warning on the tablet? These attacks won't affect anyone below Saint King." Jian Chen looked around and realized that everyone weaker than Saint King remained unharmed. Other than a few people injured from the eruption of energy from the Saint Kings, no one else suffered any injuries. Jian Chen came to a realization when he saw this. The warning on the tablet was indeed true. The formations within the Bright Moon Divine Hall indeed could not injure people below Saint King. Although he was still technically a Saint Ruler, he could display the strength of Saint Kings, which was why the formations recognized him as a Saint King. Jian Chen, be careful. The Sword Chi has condensed again. Yu warned. Jian Chen paid no attention to the Sword Chi. The 30-meter-tall Saint artifact floated above him. Then he said to the two of them, "Do you two want to enter the Saint artifact?" Jian Chen, it's not like we'll be harmed if we stay here, so why don't we stay outside? I've never witnessed such a major matter before. Yu turned down Jian Chen's suggestion. Jian Chen hesitated slightly on that, but he still agreed with Yu in the end. He did not force Yu into the artifact space, but he did hand the Saint artifact over to Yu. He secretly ordered the artifact's spirit to immediately suck the two of them away once they faced danger. The Sword Chi condensed from Moonlight Force once again and shot toward everyone like a blanket. All the Saint Kings used various abilities to resist the Sword Chi attacks. As Jian Chen had the chaotic body, he was able to resist against attacks from third heavenly layer Saint Kings. Unless they reached the fourth heavenly layer, they would not be able to break through his body at all, which was why he had it the easiest out of everyone present. However, Jian Chen could clearly feel that the attack this time was much more powerful than before after the densely packed Sword Chi struck him. Arg! Suddenly, a miserable cry rang out. Sword Chi had struck a first heavenly layer Saint King, and tremendous energy began to float unceasingly from within his body. All of it dispersed in the divine hall in the end. Shit, this bloody moonlight force is devouring my energy, the person cried out in horror. He began to panic. The complexions of all the Saint Kings present changed, becoming extremely horrible. Chapter 1044. Saint King Killing Formation 4. The Saint Force within that first heavenly layer Saint King leaked out rapidly and floated out into the moonlight barrier. It was refined into moonlight force very quickly, which strengthened the barrier. This can't continue. The more Saint Force you radiate, the stronger the barrier becomes. You need to leave here as soon as possible, called out a great elder of a protector clan. If all of your Saint Force gets devoured, you won't be able to leave even if you are a Saint King. You better leave quickly, while you still have some remaining energy. Someone within the crowd tried to persuade him. If the Saint Force continued to be refined into moonlight force, it would be extremely detrimental to everyone. The Saint King's complexion had already become the color of moonlight, extremely pale. Under everyone's insistence, he hesitated slightly before he stood up in a trembling fashion. He made his way toward the barrier with a face filled with unwillingness and regret, as he poured all his energy into suppressing the moonlight force within him, in an attempt to reduce the speed at that his Saint Force got devoured. He made his way to the barrier very quickly, but just when he wanted to leave, the barrier obstructed him. Da! The Saint King immediately roared out, as he struck the barrier as hard as he could with the curved blade in his hand. However, the barrier did not even end up trembling. The moonlight force in the sky began to condense once more into densely packed sword chi. It radiated with a great pressure that flooded the divine hall. At the same time, the odd killing intent that invaded their bodies appeared again, and it actually merged into the sword chi strand by strand. It powered up the sword chi, the second heavenly layer. The attacks this time are as powerful as a second heavenly layer Saint King. A Saint King warned the crowd. As soon as he finished his words, the sword chi began to fall and blanketed down on everyone. Jianshan stood straight where he was, unmoving like a mountain. He allowed the sword chi to strike his body, which had turned his clothes to shreds long ago. His body became littered with white marks that were all due to the sword chi. Another few miserable shrieks rang out. The sword chi was just too tightly packed, so it injured a few more weaker Saint Kings. Weird moonlight force was deposited into their bodies, as it began to devour their Saint Force. From afar, a group of Saint Rulers and Heaven Saint Masters stared at this in surprise. In their eyes, Saint Kings were supreme existences, people who stood at the apex. They held illustrious statuses, and received the admiration of everyone. Many of them found it quite difficult to believe now that so many Saint Kings had fallen into such horrible shapes. After all, it was the first time for many of the Heaven Saint Masters, and a few of the Saint Rulers, who had entered the Divine Hall to see a Saint King. The sword chi is constantly becoming stronger. If this continues, it'll become strong to the point where we can't resist it very soon. We can't just sit and wait for that to happen. We need to break through the barrier as soon as possible, called out a Saint King. Immediately, around a dozen Saint Kings drew their saint weapons. Tremendous Saint Force surged wildly within the barrier, before striking the barrier at the same time. Boom! Terrifying energy ripples pushed the Heaven Saint Masters and Saint Rulers backward, while the fragile Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters suffered quite some heavy damage. However, Yu and Carolee did not sustain any damage, as they had the protection of the Saint Artifact. After taking on the combined attack from more than 10 Saint Kings, the barrier immediately began to shake violently. However, it did not shatter. What a powerful barrier! A Saint King could not help but exclaim. He became much sterner. The Saint Rulers and people below Saint Ruler backed off some more, as they almost stuck to the barrier. All the injured Heaven Saint Masters sat with their legs crossed, as they healed their wounds. Meanwhile, a milky white light surrounded the Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters. They were using Radiant Saint Force to heal their wounds. The moonlight force within the barrier immediately began to churn, after the barrier resisted the combined attack from the Saint Kings. It condensed into densely packed sword chi in the sky once more, though there were much fewer than before. However, its power had drastically increased. Swish! 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 With a series of ear-piercing sounds, the sword qi rained upon them with unbelievable speed. Although the number had lessened, it was still like a blanket. No one could dodge it, so they were only able to forcefully resist it. After the wave of attacks, the sword qi struck 3 more Saint Kings. Although their wounds were not life-threatening, the moonlight force was extremely weird. The residue in their bodies began to devour their saint force. Regardless of how hard they tried, they could not purge it, which forced them to devote all their power into resisting it and slowing down the dissipation of their saint force. This wave of sword qi has already reached the 3rd heavenly layer. If it continues like this, the next wave should be at the 4th heavenly layer, and then the 5th, the 6th, and so on. It'll go on forever, until all of us die here. If we let that happen, we will all die. No one will be able to survive. Everyone, do not hold back. Strike the barrier with all your strength. The speakers were 2 ancestors from ancient clans. This time, everyone decided to contribute. They gathered all their power to strike at the same time, and they sent an earth-shaking attack at the barrier. Jianshen had also drawn his emperor armament and struck the barrier as soon as he could. Resisting this wave of attacks was already the limits of his chaotic body. If he did not break through the barrier, the next wave would be able to pierce his body. Although he had no idea if the moonlight force could devour his chaotic force, it was not something he wanted to risk. Boom! The combined attacks of all the Saint Kings finally broke through the extremely tough barrier, reducing it into dense strands of moonlight force that floated around the divine hall. Everyone would not help but smile slightly in relief now that they had destroyed the barrier. However, before long, a cold voice boomed out in the empty space. Those who have not heeded the warning, take responsibility for your actions. With that, streaks of bright and pure moonlight suddenly appeared. It shone blindingly like sunlight as 9 balls of light floated above the sculpture of Fairy Hao Yu in the center of the area. Each ball of light shone with bright moonlight. From afar, it seemed like 9 small moons. Rumble! The divine hall began to shake violently. One of the moons that floated above the sculpture suddenly began to enlarge and shine with dazzling light. Everyone could not help but close their eyes. When they opened their eyes once more, the scene before them had already completely changed. The familiar divine hall had disappeared, and a desolate land now replaced it. There was nothing as far as the eye could see except for dry earth. All the Saint Kings changed in expression when they saw this. They had all realized that they had fallen into another formation. Everyone had fallen into it, including the 1st heavenly layer Saint King, who was injured at the very start. It could be said that all the Saint Kings that had entered the divine hall had gathered in this formation once more. Is this landscape the moon? The great elder from the Changyang clan looked around in interest, as he said with surprise and suspicion. It doesn't matter if this landscape is the moon or not. We need to break out as soon as possible, as it definitely can't be safe. And that sudden voice back then, was that Fairy Hao Yu's voice? A great elder from the Yuan sect said with a sunken face. Uneasiness filled his eyes. Many people could not but change in expression when they heard that. But someone rebuked very quickly. Fairy Hao Yu passed away in meditation several tens of thousand years ago, so it's impossible for her to still be alive. She must have left behind that voice back then. At this moment, a mysterious suction silently appeared. It gathered around the people and slowly pulled out their saint force. Everyone immediately changed in expression. They all sat down quickly and poured all their strength into resisting the suction. However, they failed to stop the expansion of their saint force, no matter how hard they tried. Jianshen also felt the weird, mysterious force gathering around him, as if it was drawing the chaotic force within him outward. His chaotic force also began to show signs of movement, as if it had broken free of his control and was drifting outward. However, chaotic force could not be compared to saint force in the end. Under Jianshen's control, the chaotic force immediately calmed down and did not expand outward like the saint force of the Saint Kings. What a weird formation and force. I actually can't prevent the energy within me from expanding. If that's the case, let me break through this formation. I'd like to see if it can resist a strike from me. Hei Yu raised his head, and his gaze sharpened. A slivery white machete appeared in his right hand, radiating with a chilling pressure. It was a weapon with origin energy. Just with that weapon, Heiyu could deal attacks as strong as Saint Emperors and fight hand-in-hand with them. At the very top of the Divine Hall, there was an extremely pretty and illusory woman that currently sat on a pure white piece of jade within a completely sealed room. Her eyes were closed, but suddenly, she became surprised. Her eyes snapped open, and she cried out involuntarily, "Origin energy! This is origin energy! How is this possible? How can origin energy exist in this world? Wasn't all the origin energy sealed up in the distant void of space? How can this energy exist here?" The illusory woman stood up from the piece of jade, and her emotions began to churn. She was not calm in any way, and even excitement seemed to have appeared on her illusory face. Chapter 1045, Saint King Killing Formation 5. Heiyu shot into the sky with his origin energy machete, and he chopped at the sky with lightning speed. A magnificent ray appeared. It shot through the sky, as if it could destroy the surroundings, and immediately caused the space of the formation to violently tremble. Heiyu's machete had not even struck the formation, yet it had suffered great disruptions and showed signs of breaking apart. All the Saint Kings trapped in the formation stared unblinkingly at Heiyu. Their faces burned with greed and hope. There was no one present that Heiyu's powerful origin energy weapon did not tempt, but none of them had the courage to try and steal it. He has finally personally moved. How can this mere formation stop us, since he's someone who can even go up against Saint Emperors? All the Saint Kings who knew Heiyu's strength showed expression of relief. None of them believed the formation could withstand Heiyu's attack, as it was just too mighty. They all shivered inside just by standing to one side. At the same time, the illusory woman's eyes immediately lit up in the sealed room at the top of the Divine Hall. She said, "How can you people break through the illusory formation of 9 moons I personally cast down? I may not be able to use the full strength of the formation, due to the limitations of my strength, but it's still not something Saint Emperors can break through. Even experts in the origin realm will need to expend a great effort to break through it. 9 moons is one." The woman formed a seal with her hands, which constantly changed before her chest. Immediately, the 8 other smaller moons that floated above the sculpture fused with the first moon and completely became one. All the people below Saint King stood blankly afar, as they watched everything unfold. To them, they had completely lost sight of the Saint Kings. An extremely huge moon stood in the previous location of the Saint Kings. It seemed extremely like the moon, illuminating the entire area with moonlight. The moon originated from the formation, which was extremely profound. The area within the formation was an independent space that trapped all the Saint Kings. Within the formation space, Heiyu's machete viciously struck the barrier of the formation. However, now that the 9 moons had fused as one, the formation's power had greatly increased. It was nowhere as weak as before, so Heiyu's attack on the level of Saint Emperors could only cause it to tremble gently after he struck. It stabilized very soon and did not shatter. This is impossible. All of the hopeful Saint Kings changed in expression when they witnessed this, as they immediately cried out. Disbelief filled all of them. This clearly stunned Heiyu as well. He lowered his head to look at his machete as disbelief clouded his eyes. The formation has suddenly become much more powerful. With its current strength, probably even Saint Emperors will struggle to break through it, Hong Lian said from beside Jianchen. Her eyes had already become red, as if 2 balls of flames burned inside. She was using a secret technique to observe the formation. Crap. The formation has strengthened greatly, and the energy within me is leaking out at a great speed, someone cried out. All the Saint Kings present bathed in a thick layer of Saint Force, as their energy leaked from their bodies, at a rate several dozen times faster than before. Then their Saint Force dispersed in the surroundings. The mysterious suction force present in the formation space drew it out. Heiyu and Hong Lian were not spared from it either. No one could stop it. Jianchen's complexion also became rather horrible. Now that the suction force had grown, the chaotic force that he had just stabilized began to lose control again. Strands of it flowed outward uncontrollably, except it was nowhere near as fast as the Saint Force in the Saint Kings. Strands of weak, gray energy appeared around Jianshan. An aura of destruction filled it, which was extremely different from the energies within the other Saint Kings. All the Saint Kings naturally detected Jianshan's chaotic force, but no one paid attention to the unique chaotic force, as they were struggling just for themselves. A sliver of panic appeared in Jianshan's eyes. Chaotic force was extremely difficult to replenish. He could not afford an overconsumption of chaotic force. Suddenly, Jianshan roared at the sky. His eyes shone, as he poured all his strength into controlling the chaotic force. It immediately stopped flowing outward under his control, and the chaotic force around him also began to approach him bit by bit. It eventually returned into his body in the end. Odd. Just what is this power? I can clearly feel the greatness of this power, but why have I never seen it before? The illusory woman murmured in the room, at the very top of the divine hall. She furrowed her brows in thought. Suddenly she seemed to think of something. Her eyes immediately lit up, and disbelief filled her face. She said, I remember my father once mentioned a powerful energy called chaotic force. Why does the characteristics of this energy match up with the chaotic force my father mentioned? Is this chaotic force? However, the woman suddenly shook her head. Impossible. How can chaotic force appear in this world? Isn't this a great power that only people in that world can cultivate? Chapter 1046. Fight for the Divine Hall 1. Xiaobai wants to take the Saint artifact in. If that was possible, it could store Jianshan and the others into the artifact. Then it can bring them out. It's a pity that the Saint artifact can't enter, Yu murmured softly. She had understood the White Tiger's intentions very quickly. The Saint artifact spun, as it shone with a hazy golden light by the side of the formation, before returning to the air above Yu. It needed to keep Yu safe. In the formation space, the White Tiger opened its mouth. It knew that the Saint artifact did not enter the formation with it, and it immediately growled at the formation. It seemed to be filled with frustration. Jianshan understood the familiar White Tiger's intentions at first thought after he saw its behavior. He said, Xiaobai, the formation that traps us is just too powerful. We can't break it even when we all work together. All we can do now is wait for someone outside to gain control of the Divine Hall, which will allow them to control the Divine Hall as well. Immediately take Yu and Kara Liwei into the depths of the Divine Hall, to the control center. The White Tiger looked at Jianshan, as he worked hard to control his chaotic force, and worry appeared in its eyes. Afterward, it produced a deep growl, as if it had agreed to Jianshan's instructions. Xiaobai, tell the artifact spirit after you get out to not let Senior Rui Jin out no matter what. Keep him in the artifact space, until you leave the Divine Hall. Also Xia Wang, who followed me in the Sea Realm, is still cultivating inside the artifact space. Get the artifact spirit to contact him, and get him to protect you all as you venture into the depths. Jianshan gave a long list of orders to the White Tiger. Whether the people trapped in the formation could leave would completely depend on the people outside. If they failed, all the Saint Kings inside would die. The White Tiger left the artifact space with Jianshan's words. It arrived outside and recounted everything that Jianshan had said, word by word, to the artifact spirit. Although the White Tiger could not speak human tongue, the artifact spirit could understand him since he was a spirit. He immediately informed Yu and Kara Liwei of Jianshan's current situation. Yu immediately paled when she learned that Jianshan was currently in danger. Her face was filled with anxiety and deep worry, as she lost her normal composure. Kara Liwei was also anxious, but she tried as hard as she could to keep her composure. She comforted Yu. Sister Yu, don't worry. Don't we still have ways to save Jianshan? As long as we find the control center of the Divine Hall, we'll be able to save Jianshan without him suffering any harm at all. Yu tightly clenched her jade-like hands. Her palms were sweaty. Although there was still a way for them to save Jianshan, how were they supposed to pass through the many obstacles of the Divine Hall to reach the control center with these brutal saint rulers? The white tiger had already entered the Saint artifact and told Rue Jin about what had happened outside. Rue Jin was still currently filling the 3 flaming Jadites with energy. Immediately, he stopped what he was doing when he learned about what was happening outside, and he furrowed his brows. Rue Jin, there's only one way to save Master, and that's to get the mistress to gain control over the Divine Hall and shut down the formation. Master plans to call a 9th heavenly layer Saint ruler from the sea race to go out and assist Mistress in controlling the Divine Hall. But I just don't trust this person. Once he leaves the artifact space, I can't do anything to him either. I've come to you especially this time to leave a restriction within that person, just in case, the artifact spirit said to Rue Jin. Rue Jin agreed without any extra thought. There are many secret techniques of my dragon clan, and there are quite a few among them for controlling people. Bring that sea race person over. Xia Wang was currently in seclusion, as he practiced the Octoterra Emperor's cultivation method. The artifact spirit forcefully roused him and sent him to Rue Jin's side. Xia Wang, Master has orders for you to immediately leave this space and assist the mistress in taking this divine hall. However, to prevent you from going overboard in some areas, we need to leave a restriction within you. As long as you focus on assisting the mistress, nothing will happen to you. The artifact summarized. He explained the task as well as the rough situation outside to Xia Wang, so that he could have some understanding. Xia Wang's eyes immediately lit up when he heard about the Bright Moon Divine Hall. He understood the power of divine halls extremely well, and knew that once someone possessed a divine hall, they could go up against 16th star experts. No one could threaten the owner of the divine hall in any way, given that they did not come across emperors. Although the Bright Moon Divine Hall tempted Xia Wang, he dismissed these thoughts very quickly and calmed down. He still remembers his current situation, so he forcefully suppressed his itching desire. He said, "Don't worry. I, Xia Wang, am not a person who returns kindness with animosity. Since Jian Chun gave me the invaluable cultivation method of the Octoterra Emperor, without even hesitating, I will never do anything that betrays Jian Chun in this life. If I do, I am willing to suffer the punishment of utter annihilation," Xia Wang said righteously. His tone was extremely resolute. "Just in case, I will be leaving a restriction within you. If you really do something unaccounted for, I will wipe out your soul in an instant. I will personally remove it after you've accomplished your task." Rue Jin stared at Xia Wang with bright eyes. Although Xia Wang had never seen Rue Jin before, Rue Jin was definitely someone that belonged on Jian Chen's side, since he could appear here. He could even vaguely feel a pressure that made him shiver, which allowed him to know that the middle-aged man before him was definitely a powerful and terrifying expert. Xia Wang did not show any resistance toward Rue Jin's intentions of planting a restriction within him. He accepted it calmly, as he had no other choice. Afterward, Rue Jin planted a restriction on Xia Wang's soul through a secret technique of the Dragon Clan. Xia Wang's life was basically in Rue Jin's hand with the restriction, as Rue Jin only needed a single thought to wipe out Xia Wang's soul if he did anything unexpected. Xia Wang and the White Tiger left the artifact space together and appeared beside Yu. Yu had already learned of Xia Wang's identity in detail from the artifact spirit, so she did not become surprised when she saw him. She only observed him curiously, as this was her first time meeting a member of the sea race. "Is this Jian Chen's woman? I never thought that her strength would be this bad." Xia Wang observed Yu curiously as well, and he immediately felt a sliver of surprise when he saw her strength. Yu greeted Senior Xia Wang. "I shall be in your care." Yu greeted Xia Wang politely with a bow, and did not refer to him in the casual fashion that Jian Chen did. Xia Wang gained a good impression of Yu with how she behaved. He laughed aloud and said, "You're Jian Chen's woman, so you're not an outsider anyway. There's no need for us to be so polite, so just spare the terms of seniority. Just call me Xia Wang." Xia Wang and Yu spoke some more, before focusing on the main problem. Afterward, they left for the depths of the Divine Hall with the White Tiger and Carolee Wei. Quite a few Saint Rulers and Heaven Saint Masters had already entered the depths before them when Yu's group had left. There were also some Heaven Saint Masters in Class 6, radiant Saint Masters who had given up on that idea and directly backed out of the Divine Hall. They spread the news of all the trapped Saint Kings in the Divine Hall at the same time. There were still quite a lot of people floating in the cool night sky outside the Divine Hall. This included the people from the Radiant Saint Master, such as the President and the Grand Elder. As Class 7, Radiant Saint Masters, they did not enter the Divine Hall. Class 7, Radiant Saint Masters enjoyed exalted statuses on the Tianyuan continent, which were in no shape or form below Saint Kings. Also, they never took part in any of the killings and battles on the continent, so the Bright Moon Divine Hall did not possess any great use to them. They did not have the need at all to risk their lives and compete for the Divine Hall. What? All the Saint Kings that entered have been trapped. The people from the Union and the other people in the crowd all changed in expressions when they heard this news. They all felt rather perturbed, as the fear in their gazes toward the Divine Hall deepened. The formation of the Divine Hall only targets Saint Kings, and those beyond Saint King. Heaven Saint Masters and Saint Rulers are resistant to the attacks of the Divine Hall. A Heaven Saint Master who had exited said loudly. With that, the Saint King who had just hurried over through space gates and were about to enter the Divine Hall immediately halted. They became torn between surprise and suspicion. Suddenly, his eyes froze and he stared fixedly at the roof of the Divine Hall. A middle-aged man in white robes stood proudly at the highest point of the Divine Hall. No one knew exactly when he had appeared. The man seemed to have fused with the surrounding space, becoming a part of the surroundings. No one actually discovered him, as he stood in such a brazen fashion on top of the Divine Hall other than the Saint King. He seemed to be transparent, which made it extremely easy for people to miss him. The Path Lord of Carnal Desires. The Saint King recognized the man at first glance, and his eyes narrowed suddenly. In that moment, the evil-looking face of the Path Lord was rather pale. He stood rather haggardly on the top of the Divine Hall, as he mumbled to himself, "Fairy, how you sure is extravagant to collect material from the moon to build such a powerful Divine Hall. The moonlight force within this Divine Hall is weird and powerful. Also, the toughness of the Divine Hall cannot be compared with any ordinary Divine Hall. Even if I want to break through it, it'll be extremely difficult. It's a pity that the Origin Energy injured me last time. Origin Energy is just too powerful. I can't recover in such a short amount of time, and my strength is greatly reduced. Otherwise, I'd like to see what fairy how you had prepared all those years ago in the Divine Hall," the Path Lord said with some regret. Afterward he vanished. Chapter 1047. Fight for the Divine Hall too. As the news of how the Bright Moon Divine Hall prohibited the entry of Saint Kings broke out, all the Saint Rulers and some Heaven Saint Masters could no longer resist their teeming desires. They all excitedly charged into the Divine Hall. Since all the Saint Kings within the Divine Hall were now trapped, they were the most powerful people as Saint Rulers. This reignited the flames of hope within these Saint Rulers, as if the Bright Moon Divine Hall was now just right before them, waiting for them to take it. As these people entered, the number of people within the Divine Hall constantly increased. There were people as powerful as the 9th heavenly layer of Saint Ruler, and people as weak as newly broken through Heaven Saint Masters. Half of the Saint Rulers from the Radiant Saint Master Union had entered the Divine Hall as well. However, none of the Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters entered. Instead, they all remained outside and waited. They did not leave though, as they wanted to anticipate the person that the Divine Hall ended up with in the end. Yu and Kara Liwei made their way toward the depths of the Divine Hall, under the protection of Xie Wang and the White Tiger. The palm-sized saint artifact followed behind them closely and remained above Yu's head at all times. On the highest floor of the Divine Hall, the illusory woman remained seated on the pure white piece of jade with her eyes closed. Everything that went on in the Divine Hall was under her control. The woman slowly opened her eyes. She appeared to be in thought, as she mumbled, "Originally, I wanted to attract some geniuses in here so I could take their bodies. Then, I can cultivate from the start again. But it seems like there is no need to do that at all with the look of things right now. There's already an even better option. That works as well." The origin energy in this world has been sealed up. Even if I take a body for myself, I won't be able to break through Saint Emperor and reach the origin realm. However, the chaotic body is not similarly limited. However, who set down that formation in the distant outer space? Why did they seal up origin energy? It's a pity that the formation is just too powerful. I can't break through it at all. Or how would I, how you, end up in a state like this? The layout of the divine hall was extremely complicated. Hallways intersected again and again, which made it extremely easy for people to get lost. It was like a maze. You and the others became lost very quickly. They traveled recklessly through the intersecting hallways and the tunnels that would appear from time to time. They hoped that they could find the correct way. They had tried leaving down marks in places where they had traveled through, but it was impossible to leave a mark anywhere within the divine hall. It all depended on luck, whether they could make it out or not. They would come across a few heaven saint masters and saint rulers from time to time, as they made their way through the maze-like hallways, but no conflict ensured. There would also be some saint rulers who wanted to join Yu's party, but they were all turned down. They had been trapped within here for 3 whole days, before they finally found the correct way out. They arrived on the 2nd floor, but did not come across any dangers during that time. It seemed like the divine hall did not possess dangers that targeted saint rulers and those below. In these 3 days, saint rulers and heaven saint masters constantly entered the divine hall from outside. The number of people within the divine hall grew to several thousand, though most of them were heaven saint masters. The news of the trapped saint kings had already spread to the 10 protector clans and various ancient clans, which immediately shocked them greatly. The protector clans viewed this with great importance. The saint kings immediately hurried from the protector clans. They stopped outside, as they discussed the methods to save them with their brows furrowed. Even saint kings from Mercenary City had personally come. Within the formation space of the divine hall, the trapped saint kings remained seated on the floor. All of them worked hard to suppress the leakage of their energy. He Yu and Hong Lian both equipped their origin energy armors, which could drag it out a little even though it could not completely stop the leakage. A few weaker saint kings had already begun to pale. They trembled slightly as they sat on the ground. They were clearly suffering quite a lot. The saint kings that the sword chi had struck outside in particular had already powerlessly collapsed on the ground. Their eyes were dull and filled with despair, as their bodies had already lost all their energy. The loss of energy could not lead to them losing their level of cultivation. Even with all their energy gone, they could just replenish it outside, and they would return to how they were before without much time. However, saint kings without any of their energy were extremely weak. Particularly in this odd formation space, their abilities as saint kings had been restricted, and they could not use spatial and world force, so it reduced them to ordinary people. Among all the people, the only person who did not have energy leaking out was Jianshin. The power and uniqueness of chaotic force were just incomparable to ordinary energy. However, Jianshin still needed to devote all his strength into suppressing it even though that was the case. I hope you can successfully obtain the divine hall, or all of us trapped here will just be waiting for our deaths, Jianshin prayed inside. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. During that time, countless people entered the divine hall, and people could be seen everywhere within it. However, most of them were heaven saint masters. During that period of time, Yu's group had already passed through 8 floors of mazes and arrived on the 9th floor of the divine hall. Undoubtedly, the surface area of the 9th floor was much smaller than the floors below. It seemed more like an extremely large hall when gazing out. There were 9 huge stone pillars with simple carvings that held up the ceiling. Vague moonlight force revolved around each pillar and radiated with a tremendous pressure. The hall was beautifully decorated. All the stone tables, seats, and various ornaments were carved from the same type of jade. Every single item was extremely exquisite. It was impossible to estimate their value. A mighty but extravagant throne hovered in the air at the end of the hall. On the throne lay a 2-meter-long exquisitely crafted scepter that shone with a moonlight haze. It was extremely pleasant to the eye. Yu's party were not the first people to arrive. Before them, various saint rulers and a few heaven saint masters had already arrived. Although the hall was not packed, there were several hundred people that had already gathered at the very least. All of them stared at the staff on the throne with bright eyes, and no one made any noise. The atmosphere was extremely weird. Although the treasure was right before them, no one went ahead to take it. All the people who could arrive here were very clever. They knew that the first person to go up for the treasure would be the first one to suffer from all the attacks of the people present. Even ninth heavenly layer, saint rulers would struggle greatly to leave with their lives intact. That staff definitely is not so simple. It might be hiding some secret. You never know. And that throne is not your ordinary, everyday object either. Xia Wang stared unblinkingly at the throne, as he said with a soft voice. Roar! The white tiger narrowed its eyes, as they shone with a threatening light. It immediately took a leap, and turned into a blur that shot toward the throne. It viewed the several hundred saint rulers and heaven saint master that had gathered as nothing. Xia Wang did not charge up with him. Instead, he remained close to Yu Yu and Caroli Wei to protect him. He kept loyal to his task to protect the two of them. That's the winged tiger god. The winged tiger god wants to take the scepter. Quick, stop it. The scepter must hide the cultivation method of Fairy Hao Yu. It might even be the object that can directly control the divine hall. We can't let the winged tiger god obtain it. Whoever gains the scepter will be the one who controls the divine hall. The white tiger's action shattered the odd atmosphere in the divine hall. At that moment, no one hesitated anymore, as they all charged toward the scepter at their top speeds. The white tiger at the very front also became the target of everyone's attacks, where more than 20 saint rulers sent powerful sword chi at it, with a wave of their hands at the same time. Before the great temptation of the divine hall, and the cultivation method of Fairy Hao Yu, they all lost their minds. The fact that the white tiger was the winged tiger god no longer bothered them. Chapter 1048. Fight for the Divine Hall 3. Over 20 sword chi from saint rulers shot toward the white tiger, as they radiated with powerful ripples of energy. In order to stop the white tiger from getting close to the throne, none of the saint rulers held back. The white tiger's eyes remained fixed on the scepter. It did not even look at the sword chi behind it. When the sword chi almost struck, the white tiger abruptly began to enlarge, and turned into a 10-meter-long white tiger in an instant. It unfurled its huge, white wings, while a great energy seemed to be secretly charging up. Whoosh! With the sound of a wild gust, the huge wings of the white tiger suddenly flapped backward. Two huge whirlwinds immediately formed, and quickly collided with the sword chi from behind. After it enlarged, the speed of the white tiger skyrocketed. It shot toward the scepter like an arrow, several times faster than before. The powerful sword chi collided with the whirlwinds the white tiger produced. With a muffled boom, the sword chi all shattered into pieces from the spinning wind, and the whirlwinds continued onward without dispersing after blocking the attacks. The whirlwinds obstructed the saint rulers that pursued behind the white tiger, which allowed it to approach the huge, hovering throne successfully. There was nothing protecting the throne, so the white tiger leaped onto it without coming across any obstructions. It gripped the scepter with its mouth, before returning along its previous route. It leaped in Yu Yu's direction in the form of a faint blur. The winged tiger god has taken the scepter. Quick, steal it back. Fairy Hao Yu's treasure is right before our eyes. Quickly stop the winged tiger god. Whoever who gets the scepter will be the one who obtains a fortuitous encounter. With the scepter taken, all the people immediately began to churn. There were a few people who were unwilling to see the scepter taken, just like that before them. So they fanned on everyone, as they stood on the ground. Everyone had become green with greed. In that moment, all the saint rulers within the hall began to move. They encircled the white tiger with extremely great teamwork, and surrounded it from all directions. There were more than 10 saint weapons that shot through the air with powerful ripples of energy, chopping toward the huge body of the tiger with lightning speed. Accompanying them was another wave of over 20 sword chi. The attacks formed a shapeless net in the air that sealed out all routes of escape for the white tiger, as the attacks fell down like a blanket. The white tiger stopped midair awe-inspiringly. It looked around with a threatening light in its eyes, before throwing its head up. It tossed the scepter high up into the air, which allowed it to open its mouth and produce an earth-shaking roar. Immediately, visible sound waves quickly began to expand with the white tiger as the epicenter. The sound wave possessed an unimaginable force. When it collided with the saint weapons of the saint kings and the sword chi, all the sword chi dissipated, while the saint weapons in the hands of the saint rulers trembled violently. It seemed like an invisible force was stopping their advance, which not only made it extremely difficult for them to continue onward, but also forced them backward constantly. The sound wave expanded extremely quickly and covered the entire room very soon. It swept past everyone and immediately reduced all their clothes to shreds, forcing them into a horrible shape. Miserable cries rang through the entire room. The white tiger's roar possessed the might of a beast god, so it possessed a penetrative characteristic. It could injure the souls of people. The heaven saint masters all shrieked, as they clutched their heads painfully due to their weaker souls. Only saint rulers could endure it, but even for them, they showed signs of pain. It still affected their souls greatly. The white tiger's strength was not at the peak of Class 7, but it was a winged tiger god after all. It possessed inherited memories and could learn powerful abilities, while its battle prowess was shocking. Just the might of its roar was enough to shock many ninth heavenly layer saint rulers. The combined attacks from several dozen saint rulers collapsed from the roar. The white tiger did not continue to bother with them. It caught the scepter as it fell down. Then it bounded toward you. Leave the scepter, or you won't be leaving today. The saint rulers recovered extremely quickly and courageously charged toward white tiger. All of them had lost their calm before the temptation. Their only desire was to obtain the scepter. In that moment, the white tiger had become the enemy of everyone. All the saint rulers took part in restricting the white tiger's movements, striking the white tiger without holding back at all. They were attempting to kill it. Afar, a few saint rulers even began to charge up their saint-tier battle skills. The white tiger seemed to be agitated as well. It growled deeply as dense killing intent flickered through its vicious eyes. It charged threateningly toward a few saint rulers that blocked its way. As it flapped its wings violently, it shot out powerful wind blades at them. The saint rulers all knew how powerful the winged tiger god was. They faced it as a powerful enemy. They swung their saint weapons as fast as they could, as they chopped at the wind blades. Boom! The wind blades and saint weapons collided, which immediately produced a powerful ripple of energy. The wind blades dispersed, while the powerful force of the collision and the wave of energy knocked back the saint rulers. They all quickly shot backward. At this moment, around a dozen saint rules that shot over from the sides approached the white tiger as well. Chapter 1049. Fight for the Divine Hall 4. The three saint rulers who were casting the saint-tier battle skills all originated from ancient clans and belonged to the ninth heavenly layer. Their saint-tier battle skills were equivalent to attacks from saint kings with their current strengths. The other saint rules had kept the white tiger busy earlier, which provided the three saint rulers with enough time to charge up their battle skills. They had completed the charge up now, and the devastating power was about to erupt. A tremendous pressure that originated from the surroundings seemed to flood the entire hall, which caused everyone gathered in there to shiver. They all looked toward the three saint rulers with obvious fear and dread. The white tiger revealed a stern gaze once again. With its body as a beast god, it indeed had the power to look down on all the saint rulers, but the battle skills it currently faced was on the level of saint kings. That was enough to threaten it. It was already too late to stop the three saint rulers from casting the saint-tier battle skills. The white tiger quickly began to swipe the space before it with its front paws. With every swipe, a tiny ripple would appear. Saint-tier battle skill. Heaven-cleaving sword. Saint-tier battle skill. Swing beyond samsara. Saint-tier battle skill. Divine fist of the sixth paths. With three bellows, the saint rulers simultaneously cast their battle skills after their long charge up. The first person lifted his sword over his head and swung out in the air. They produced a blinding sword qi that shot toward the white tiger with an unstoppable force. The curved blade in the second person's hand followed an extremely profound trajectory. A vague ripple immediately appeared, and it quickly spread toward the white tiger. Wherever it passed, space would shake violently and become blurry. Although it did not really seem like anything, it possessed terrifying might. A layer of extremely dense energy coated the third person's fist. The fist seemed to move slowly, but it was flung out with exceedingly great speed. His entire right hand disappeared as he punched out. It was like it had completely fused with the surrounding space and entered another dimension. However, in the next moment 6 huge fists, completely condensed from energy, appeared above the white tiger's head. They all spun and revolved in a circle with one another, as each fist radiated with a terrifying aura. The paws of the white tiger swiped faster and faster. Slowly, it drew an extremely complicated image in the air. It was blurry, but it radiated with a profound aura. Each line and image seemed to contain the laws of the world. This was a defensive technique that originated from the white tiger's inherited memories. This was its first time it had used it. As soon as the formation appeared, it expanded before the white tiger. Boom! The heaven-cleaving sword struck the formation viciously and caused it to violently shake. The formation began to flicker, and terrifying energy ripples rammed into the surrounding walls, producing pattering sounds. The sword qi became locked in a stalemate with the formation in mid-air. The energy of both the formation and the sword qi quickly began to leak away, but it failed to break through the formation before completely dispersing. The defensive formation also darkened after it blocked the battle skill equivalent to a Saint King's attack. Then its lines and images began to blur. Some lines had even been severed. When the giant sword qi vanished, a wave of faint spatial ripples collided viciously against the formation of the white tiger as well. At the same time, one of the 6 revolving fists fell from above the white tiger, as it directly targeted the white tiger's head. Roar! The white tiger shook its head and directly tossed the scepter in its mouth in Yu Yu's direction. Afterward, it produced an earth-shaking roar at the sky. A visible sound wave emerged from its mouth and spread upward to meet with the 6 fists. The defensive formation in front of the white tiger was no longer as powerful as before. After the second Saint Tier battle skill struck it, it only lasted for a short while before shattering lowly. The odd ripples surged toward the huge white tiger like a wave of water, passing through the white tiger's body. The white tiger trembled slightly, and a faint, bloody mark had already appeared below its neck. Bright blood immediately began to pour from its body, dyeing its white fur red. Terrifying energy ripples began to spread from above, as the white tiger's roar destroyed the first fist of the 6. However, the second and third fist began to fall closely after one another soon afterward. They separately targeted the white tiger's head and back. Both of them moved extremely quickly. The wings on the tiger's back rose up high, as they blocked the fists that targeted its back. Its front paws clawed in a flurry, as it forcefully received the punch that targeted its head. With a boom, the 2 punches smashed the white tiger to the ground. The attack had injured its wings, as the snow-white feathers became red. Even its front paws became bloody, even as the winged tiger god with extremely great battle prowess. The white tiger struggled to remain unscathed when it faced 3 Saint Tier battle skills at the same time. After all, it had not reached the peak of Class 7 yet. Looking at the scepter that flew over, a gleam of light flashed through Xia Wang's eyes. He had always remained by Yu Yu's side, as he protected her. He immediately leaped up to catch the scepter, before returning to Yu Yu's side. He first examined it curiously, before extending his hand to give it to Yu Yu without any hesitation. Currently, Yu Yu had focused all her attention on the white tiger. She did not even glance at the scepter that had attracted countless people. She began to worry even more after she saw that the saint rulers had injured the white tiger injured. She called out anxiously, "Xiaobai is injured. Artifact spirit, quickly go save Xiaobai." "Don't worry, mistress. The winged tiger god won't be in much danger. It has experienced far too little battles as it grew up as well, so this is a rare opportunity for it." The artifact spirit's voice appeared in Yu Yu's head. Someone has taken the scepter. A person cried out. Everyone immediately moved their attention from the white tiger to Xia Wang, who now held the scepter. They no longer bothered to watch the fascinating battle going on with the white tiger anymore. Instead, they all charged at Xia Wang. Xia Wang's expression drastically changed. Although he was a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler, he was nowhere near as strong as the winged tiger god. How could he handle so many opponents? Especially when there were quite a few people who were also at the 9th heavenly layer like him. The last 3 giant fists also switched their targets. They no longer attacked the white tiger, now smashing threateningly towards Xia Wang's group. Grab the scepter and enter the artifact space. Xia Wang called out in a panic. Yu also understood the situation now. She immediately took the scepter from Xia Wang's hands and wanted to hide in the artifact space. However, she waited for quite a long time, but she remained where she was. Carolee Wei, who was beside her, had instead disappeared. She had already entered the artifact space. Oh no, mistress. If you're holding that scepter, you can't enter the space. The scepter is resisting, the artifact spirit said sternly in Yu Yu's head. But at this moment, the 3 remaining fists had already approached Yu Yu and Xia Wang. One of them smashed toward Xia Wang, while the other 2 completely locked onto Yu Yu, who held the scepter. Chapter 1050. Fairy Hao Yu's sudden appearance. 1. As the fists from the Saint tier battle skills switched targets, the pressure from the surroundings also collapsed viciously on Xia Wang and Yu Yu's bodies. Xia Wang became extremely stern. It was a Saint tier battle skill after all, and every fist would be at the level of Saint Kings. It would be extremely difficult for him to block them with his strength at the 9th heavenly layer. Arg! Xia Wang roared at the sky. Churning blue light wildly flooded out of his body, before condensing on his finger and shooting toward the fists. A thumb-sized force shot through space as it radiated with blue light, shooting toward the fists with an aura of destruction. This was a powerful attack that Xia Wang had comprehended from the cultivation method of the Octoterra Emperor. Although it was not on the level of Saint tier battle skills, it was as powerful as a pseudo-Saint tier battle skill. Locked on by 2 fists, the pressure Yu Yu experienced was even greater. She could not withstand it at all with her strength that was below Earth Saint Master, so she immediately paled. Traces of blood began to pour from her mouth. Before the attack had even struck her, just the mere pressure was terrifying enough to injure her. With a loud boom, Xia Wang's attack landed on the fist that flew toward him. The attack was not on the level of Saint tier battle skills, so it dispersed as soon as they came in contact. The fist continued on toward Xia Wang without any reduction in speed, though its force had decreased by quite a bit. Bang! The weakened fist viciously struck Xia Wang's body. He was thrown back like a sandbag as blood sprayed wildly from his mouth. A dazzling golden light appeared above Yu Yu's head. The saint artifact that always floated above her suddenly expanded, becoming a 30-meter-tall golden tower, which blocked the area in front of her in a short moment. It helped Yu Yu resist the attacks. Boom! Boom! Both of the fists landed on the saint artifact with 2 violent booms. They did not even shake the saint artifact. Its toughness was not something that could be overcome by saint tier battle skills. Even though Yu Yu was protected by the saint tier battle skill, it was not enough to put a stop to everyone's desire for the scepter. Several dozen saint rulers had already began to threateningly charge toward her from all directions. On any other day, they probably would not dare to harm Yu Yu due to their fear of Jian Chun. But before the great enticement present, many of them had already forgotten about living and dying. Mistress, quickly throw the scepter away and enter the artifact space. That's the only way I can ensure that you stay completely safe. The artifact spirit's voice rang through Yu Yu's head. Although the artifact spirit was a saint emperor in the artifact space, it was innately restricted, so its abilities were greatly limited. The power it could use outside was extremely weak, so protecting her outside from enemies coming in all directions was extremely difficult. Yu Yu looked at the scepter hesitantly, as a sliver of unwillingness appeared in her eyes. She did not covet the scepter. It was just that the way to save Jian Chun might lie with the scepter. Mistress, give up on the scepter first, and enter the artifact space. Don't worry about the Divine Hall. Rui Jin still has his most powerful card up his sleeve. The artifact spirit called out anxiously. With that, Yu finally made up her mind. She grit her teeth and began swinging her hand. She was about to throw away the scepter. If you throw away the moon god's scepter, you will never be able to save the person you want to save. Consider it. At this moment, a woman's pleasant voice rang through Yu's head. The sudden appearance of the voice surprised Yu, which caused her to immediately tighten her grasp on the scepter. She clutched it tightly and looked around in surprise, as if she wanting to find who the speaker was. You have not thrown away the moon god's scepter. You have made a choice. Don't worry, you'll be fine. The same voice rang in Yu's head. It was extremely obscure, and only Yu could hear it. However, she could not tell where it came from. Suddenly, the scepter in Yu's hand exploded with bright light. An extremely terrifying energy erupted from the scepter, sweeping into the surroundings in the form of a storm. It flung all the saint rulers that charged toward her afar. Even the saint artifact floating above her head was unable to avoid it. It too was knocked far away by the powerful force. The energy from the scepter did not distinguish between enemies and friends. Other than Yu, everyone, including the white tiger, Xie Wang, and the saint artifact, were flung far away. In the blink of an eye, everyone had disappeared within a radius of several hundred meters from Yu. She seemed like the only one present as bright moonlight surrounded her. Yu watched everything unfold in a dumbstruck fashion. She just struggled to believe that such a powerful energy had erupted from the very peaceful scepter. It filled her with disbelief. Before she could return to her senses, she suddenly felt her body tighten up. She had been surrounded by a mysterious force and brought into the air. She quickly flew toward the throne at the very back of the hall. Quick, stop her. Once she obtains the Divine Hall, we will have no more chances left. A saint ruler cried out in a panic after being knocked far away. Afterward, he immediately climbed up, shooting after Yu as fast as he could. He wanted to stop Yu from approaching the throne. All the other saint rulers paid no heed to their injured either. All of them wanted to take the Divine Hall for themselves, so none of them wanted to allow Yu to take what they drooled over. They all took part in encircling and stopping Yu. A terrifying ripple of residual energy spread out, and all the saint rulers struck out as hard as they could. Various powerful attacks flew in from all directions, all targeting Yu. Yu had been completely coated in dense moonlight by the scepter. When the saint rulers' attacks landed on that layer of light, they all collapsed by themselves, unable to harm Yu since she was surrounded by moonlight. Under the protection of the moonlight, Yu arrived near the throne without any obstruction despite being targeted by so many densely packed attacks. Afterward, she just landed on top of it with the scepter in hand. As soon as she sat down, the space surrounding the throne began to violently twist. Everything blurred, obscuring everyone's vision. When it returned back to normal, Yu had already disappeared from the throne. Chapter 1051. Fairy Hao Yu's sudden appearance too. Where is she? How'd she vanish? Everyone exclaimed in surprise when they saw the empty throne. They all became momentarily stunned. Suddenly, one of the saint rulers who had cast a saint-tier battle skill earlier seemed to think of something. A gleam of light flashed across his eyes, and he immediately flew to the throne. A white blur flashed past as soon as he approached the throne. The bloodied, white tiger had suddenly appeared before him. It opened its mouth and spat out a fist-sized ball of energy. Bang! With a muffled sound, the ball of energy exploded on the person's chest. The ball turned his chest into a bloody mess, causing him to immediately fly back as he vomited blood. Many of the people present saw what the saint ruler tried to do. With a slight thought, quite a few of them saw through his intentions. They all began to leap toward the throne without any hesitation in attempt to sit on it. Roar! The white tiger produced a roar to the sky, guarding the throne from everyone who tried to approach it. Although it was heavily injured, its might did not decrease at all. Vaguely, its presence even seemed more powerful than before. However, there were just too many saint rulers who charged at the throne. There were even quite a few heaven saint masters between them who wanted to try their luck. so it was impossible for the white tiger to block everyone just by itself. 3 saint rulers had already made their way past the white tiger and arrived before the throne, elbowing their way onto the throne all at the same time. The throne levitated 10 meters in the sky as it shined with a faint layer of moonlight force. It was much greater than the dragon thrones used by emperors. It seemed like a bed. It was large enough for 4 or 5 people to sit on at the same time. As the 3 saint rulers sat on the throne at the same time, joy immediately burst forth inside them. However, before they could celebrate, their expressions suddenly changed. In that short moment, all of their auras vanished, and they became extremely pale and haggard. Afterward, they fell off the throne, landing heavily on the ground. They probably could not get up anymore. Many people witnessed what happened to the 3 of them. The saint rulers who were just about to plunk their bottoms on the throne immediately halted, as they stared at the 3 unmoving people on the ground in surprise. "Oh no, the throne is weird. You can't sit on it. The saint force in all 3 of them has been completely sucked away by the throne," a saint ruler said in fear. Immediately, everyone around the throne stopped moving. They stopped in the surroundings as they gazed at the throne in shock and suspicion. No one dared to sit down on the throne now. In the blink of an eye, the hall fell silent from the very intense battles from before. The bloody white tiger also stopped attacking, staring fixedly at the throne. The saint artifact returned to its size of a fist and flew over. It stopped above the white tiger's head and slowly rotated. Now that Yu had vanished from the hall, the saint artifact's target to protect switched to the white tiger. "All of you go. Leave the bright moon divine hall." At this moment, an obscure voice sounded through the hall. With it, a white-clothed woman suddenly appeared on the empty throne. She was illusory and not tangible, though her beauty was on par with a goddess. Why, you're Fairy Hao Yu." All the people changed in expression when they saw the illusory woman. Disbelief flooded their faces. The woman seemed exactly the same as the sculpture they had seen earlier in the divine hall. Fairy Hao Yu sat on the throne in a leisurely manner. Her expression was cold, like an iceberg that would not melt even after several millennia. It made people feel like she was unapproachable, and she seemed to look down on everyone within the hall. Her cold eyes only stopped on the white tiger for a split second. "Fairy Hao Yu, why? You're actually still alive." "Fairy Hao Yu's actually still alive." All the saint rulers in the hall began to murmur. They became extremely emotional. Fairy Hao Yu was a supreme expert several tens of thousand years ago. She was known as the strongest saint emperor, and the strength she possessed was at a terrifying level. Yet now she who was supposed to be dead was actually still alive. It was a stirring and unexpected piece of news. Many saint rulers had already dropped to their knees within the hall. They bowed courteously to the woman. Some of them even cried out that they wanted to take her to take them in as disciples. Fairy Hao Yu furrowed her brows as a sliver of impatience appeared on her face. She coldly said, "All of you get out. From now on, the divine hall forbids the entry of all people." Fairy Hao Yu waved her hand, and a ball of powerful moonlight force began to radiate from the throne. It sent everyone there to the first floor. In the blink of an eye, the top floor of the divine hall became empty. Everyone was gone, and soon afterwards, Fairy Hao Yu disappeared from the throne as well. Yu stood in confusion as she curiously looked around the completely sealed room. She mumbled, "Weird. How did I get here, and what is this place?" "Your name is Yu?" Suddenly, a cold voice rang out from behind her. Yu jumped in fright since she was unprepared. Yu immediately turned around and saw an ethereal beauty seated on a piece of jade, staring back at her. Yu immediately became surprised when she saw the woman's appearance, because she was exactly the same as the sculpture of Fairy Hao Yu. "Why, you're Fairy Hao Yu." Yu stared at Fairy Hao Yu in surprise as she uncontrollably cried out, "Correct. I am Fairy Hao Yu." She was extremely nonchalant. She flicked her hand at the air gently, and the space began to ripple violently. It changed rapidly as the formation space, where all the Saint Kings were trapped, gradually appeared. This was only an image within the formation space. It was taken by Fairy Hao Yu through an ability, Jian Chun. Yu immediately cried out involuntarily the instant she saw Jian Chun. Worry filled her face. So the person you care so much about is called Jianchen. May I ask who he is to you? Fairy Hao Yu stared calmly at Yu Yu. Jianchen is my fiancé. Fairy Hao Yu, I beg of you to let Jianchen go. Yu Yu pleaded as she looked at Jianchen. She had originally come to gain control of the Divine Hall, so she could save Jianchen. But her intentions had vanished accordingly now that she had found out Fairy Hao Yu was still alive. Yu Yu had no interest in the Divine Hall. Her greatest wish right now was to save Jianchen. Jianchen's actually your fiancé. Fairy Yu Yu murmured softly as light flickered through her eyes. After a period of silent thought, she said to Yu Yu, Yu Yu, if you want to save your fiancé, there is only one way. That is to take me as your master. Are you willing? Chapter 1052. Yu Yu takes a master. Yu Yu became completely stunned when she heard that. She stared at Fairy Hao Yu blankly as disbelief flooded her face. Yu Yu had heard about the legends of Fairy Hao Yu from other people long ago. Fairy Hao Yu was a prodigy, an unprecedented genius at cultivation. It took her just a little more than 2,000 years to reach the peak of Saint Emperor, coming only an inch away from surpassing that. Even in ancient times, there was no one who could compare to her cultivation speed. After reaching the peak of Saint Emperor, she had even flown to the distant moon all by herself. She set foot on the unfamiliar territory that people rarely ever went to, collecting valuable resources to build her divine hall. Her abilities were so great, and her powers were so outstanding, that even among all the Saint Emperors, there was rarely anyone who could match up to her. Currently, the great Fairy Hao Yu actually wanted to take her as a disciple. Great joy flooded her entire spirit in that instance, making it difficult for her to return to her senses in a short amount of time. Taking a Saint Emperor as a master was a glorious matter, something worthy of being proud. Even with the entire continent in perspective, this was something that many people would not even consider. Yu Yu had never thought that she, someone who was far from being a prodigy, would actually be asked to become a disciple of a Saint Emperor. Fairy Hao Yu remained calm throughout. She showed no emotions as she asked once more, Yu Yu, are you willing to take me as your master? Yu Yu finally calmed down. She forcefully suppressed her churning emotions and asked calmly, Fairy Hao Yu, I understand myself that my talent is nowhere near a prodigy's level. So may I ask why Fairy Hao Yu has chosen me to become your disciple? Won't my future accomplishments sully your name? You are correct. Your talent is at most 1 in 10,000, nowhere close to a genius talent. However, do you know how wondrous the method I cultivate is? It was the cultivation method that my great father, the moon god, used several tens of thousand years of effort to create specifically for me. It takes from the fortunes of nature. It's so wondrous that even if it's cultivated by people with ordinary talent, they will have quite the future. Also, there's the divine hall that I worked so hard to create all those years ago. I've sealed moon essence into it. I only need to use a portion of it to modify your body, using a secret technique, and have you undergo a rebirth, so that your body becomes set for cultivation. Fairy Hao Yu guaranteed. What? Your cultivation method was created by your father after several tens of thousand years? I've only heard that Saint Emperors have a lifespan of 10,000 years. Is your father a supreme expert who's surpassed Saint Emperor? Yu Yu stared at Fairy Hao Yu in surprise. A sliver of disdain flashed through Fairy Hao Yu's eyes when she heard about surpassing a Saint Emperor. She said, the origin realm's nothing. If the origin energy in this world wasn't sealed on the distant edge of outer space, I would have reached the origin realm long ago. As for my father, you will understand after you become my disciple. Yu Yu immediately dropped to her knees and said, I am indebted to Fairy Hao Yu's kindness. I, Yu Yu, am willing to become your disciple. Disciple greets master. Yu Yu bowed her head 9 times to Fairy Hao Yu. Fairy Hao Yu finally showed a slight smile on her illusory face. She said, my obedient disciple, get up quickly. You are my first disciple. With that, an invisible force lifted Yu Yu up. Afterward, Fairy Hao Yu continued, the moon god's scepter in your hands was a scepter I made after collecting materials according to the design of my father's scepter. Now your master no longer needs it. I've sealed a portion of moonlight force into the scepter, so carry it with you in the future. It can protect you. Yu examined the scepter. It was made out of some unknown crystal, and was as light as a feather. She could not feel any weight at all. The entire scepter was clouded by a faint layer of moonlight force, shining with a hazy glow. Vaguely, she could see a simple pattern on the scepter. Master, disciple has some questions. Could everyone who obtained the scepter arrive here and be taken as a disciple of Master? Yu asked. Fairy Hao Yu proudly smiled and said, There's no one in the world who has the right to become my disciple, and I had no intentions of taking one before. When the divine hall suddenly appeared, I had my own intentions. The scepter is useless to those who would have gotten a hold of it. They can't take it out of the hall anyway. But I changed my mind later on due to some reasons, which is why I made an exception to take you as my disciple. Because of Jian Shen? Yu probed. She recognized the reason why Fairy Hao Yu had taken her in as a disciple long ago. It was because of Jian Shen. Alright, don't ask anymore, my dear disciple. All you need to understand is that Master has no ill intentions toward you. Master's original disciple, and only exists in the form of a soul now. This is why Master will be extremely limited in her abilities to assist you when you come across dangers in the future. However, once you cultivate my method, I will give you control of the Divine Hall. The Divine Hall is something I was proud of when I made it all those years ago, so it's extraordinarily tough. There's also layers upon layers of formations in the Divine Hall, so as long as you have it protecting you, even experts in the Origin realm will be kept busy for a while. The name of the cultivation method is the Mirror of the Moon God. If it is practiced with a special constitution, the rate will be greatly increased. Allow Master to assist you in rebirthing with the moon essence sealed within the Divine Hall. I'll pass the cultivation method on to you after that. Then you can control the Divine Hall and save the person you want to save. Although Fairy Yu was in the form of a soul, she still possessed supreme control over the Divine Hall. With a single thought, extremely dense moon essence gathered from the surroundings, slowly approaching Yu in the form of the light of a rainbow. Afterward, all of it entered her body, improving her talent by modifying her constitution. As she watched Yu be coated by the thick layer of moon essence, Fairy Hao Yu suddenly seemed to fall into a trance. She thought, Father, your daughter's not dead. Very soon, I'll be able to return to your side, and then I will tell you about Nan Potion's scheme. Nan Patian has wild ambitions. He wants to take your position as the leader of the Moon God Hall. Now that so many years have passed, I wonder if you're fine? Has the Moon God Hall fallen into Nan Potion's hands? As she thought, her illusory face suddenly became filled with deep worry. At the same moment, the huge formation still took up the same amount space on the first floor of the Divine Hall just like before, filling up a large portion of the hall where the sculpture was. A large group of people regretfully stood in the region close to where the formation lay. A few of them were even dejected, as if their souls had disappeared. These people had all been sent down from the top floor by the Divine Hall's power. Now, all of them understood that the Divine Hall was most likely taken by Yu, who had disappeared from the throne with the scepter in her hand, which was why all of them were filled with deep regret and dejection. Xia Wang and the White Tiger stood together. The fist-sized saint artifact floated over the White Tiger's head as it slowly spun. Currently, both of them were covered in blood, in horrible shape. Their injuries were quite deep. I never thought that Fairy Hao Yu would still be alive. Yu's definitely been taken away by Fairy Hao Yu. She should be fine, right? Though what happens next isn't something we can control or interfere with, Xia Wang said gruffly. He was rather helpless. The White Tiger remained as awe-inspiring as before, standing with its head up high. It stared fixedly at the formation space up ahead as worry filled its eyes. No one knew if Jian Shen could make it out of the formation space, now that Yu's situation was unknown. Chapter 1053. New Master of the Divine Hall. 1. Sigh. I never thought that we'd expend so much energy while fighting over the scepter only for it to fall into the hands of a girl who's not even an Earth Saint Master. This is a huge joke. Among the crowd, a bloody, pale-faced old man, made a self-depreciating statement. He was filled with heavy dejection, and vaguely, there seemed to be slivers of envy. He was envious of you. There's no point in continuing to stay in this divine hall. Whatever. If we have to watch that girl come out beaming with smiles while we're filled with regret, we might as well leave now, just in case we feel even more miserable when that moment comes. The old man stared at the ceiling of the divine hall in a daze, as he mumbled to himself. He turned around and left as he did all that, leaving the divine hall in dejection. Isn't this all because of the winged tiger god? If it weren't for the winged tiger god getting in our way, the scepter would have entered our hands long ago. How could it be taken by a weak girl? You still don't understand? The winged tiger god tried extremely hard to stop us for the lady to obtain the scepter. Sigh, too bad she's Jian Chen's fiancé. With Jian Chen as her great supporter, even the extremely prideful winged tiger god ended up helping her out. Sigh, my daughter's roughly the same as that girl. She's also an alluring beauty, a woman of rare appearance. If my daughter could foster a relationship with Jian Chen, how good would that be? A hubbub of discussion resonated in the surroundings. Many people regretfully sighed. They were unwilling to accept this outcome, because they had come across no other treasures other than the scepter on their journey within the divine hall. They had worked hard for so long, yet in the end, they had obtained nothing. How could the people be satisfied with nothing? Quite a few people looked at the winged tiger god with undisguised hatred and resentment. All of them were extremely confident in themselves, and filled with confidence in their strength. All of them believed that if it were not for the winged tiger god, the scepter would have been theirs long ago. Although many people in the crowd held deep hatred for the winged tiger god, none of them dared to do anything to it. All of them had gained a deep understanding of the winged tiger god's supreme battle prowess. It had only been somewhat heavily injured when it was facing against many saint rulers and 3 saint-tier battle skills. Killing it would be even more difficult. None of them knew if the winged tiger god was hiding any other abilities or secret techniques. All the people within the divine hall were sent to the same place by the power of the divine hall. So in that instance, the number of people on the first floor suddenly exploded. It became densely packed, almost filling up all the remaining space of the divine hall. The people who were still in the mazes before, and had yet to reach the final floor, learned about what had happened. They were filled with despair and regret. They all left the divine hall in low spirits after a short while. People constantly left the divine hall, causing the number of people to rapidly fall. In the end, only around 100 people remained, including the winged tiger god and Xia Wang. All of them stared at the formation where the Saint Kings were trapped in worry. The illusory fairy Hao Yu had already left where she sat before in the sealed room. She left the piece of jade for Yu. Currently, Yu lay on the piece of jade, and was enveloped by a thick layer of moon essence. With her eyes closed, the dense moonlight force around her constantly seeped into her body, rapidly improving her body. Fairy Hao Yu stared at Yu in mixed emotions as the moon essence enveloped her. She thought, the mirror of the moon god was specifically created by my father for me. The cultivation method is extremely profound in that it takes from nature itself. My father once told me that I was the only person who could cultivate with it. Any other person who uses it will become eternally doomed. I wonder if passing this cultivation method on to you was the right decision. Though, father also once told me that the people who try to use this cultivation method will face the drawbacks once they break through the origin realm and attain godhood. Meanwhile, it will be extremely difficult for Yu to reach Saint Emperor within her life. Even with the support of heavenly resources, her limit will only be Saint King at most. If she cultivates the mirror of the moon god right now, and has her body modified by the moon essence, she will be able to reach Saint Emperor in the very least. If origin energy was still present, she might even be able to reach the origin realm. She may never attain godhood from today on, but at least she can live much longer. In that case, I won't really be harming her. It had already been half a month since the divine hall had appeared, and it had become extremely crowded outside the divine hall. The air was filled with densely packed figures everywhere, ranging from heaven's saint masters to saint kings. Several great elders had come from the protector clans, and even the Grand Elder of Mercenary City, Tianjian, had personally come. The ancestors of many ancient clans had come as well, resulting in the gathering of many saint kings. All of them stared at the divine hall with furrowed brows. The people who had just left the divine hall brought out the latest news with them, allowing everyone to learn that Fairy Haoyu was still alive, and that her figure remained in the divine hall. At the same time, they learned how an extremely weak woman had obtained the scepter, and was sent to some unknown place by the throne of the divine hall. Chapter 1054. New Master of the Divine Hall 2. What's happening? Why can't I feel the suction force? Has it stopped working on me after it's realized that it can't suck away my chaotic force? Or has something else happened in the Divine Hall? Jianshan thought. So many days have already passed. I wonder how you and the others are right now. Have they successfully gained control over the Divine Hall? At the same time, a woman in blue robes currently sat within a sealed room, as she cultivated 1,000 meters below the surface of the earth at the Huanggu clan. She was extremely pretty, possessing beauty that could outshine the moon and few could rival. She could enchant countless men. A faint layer of water blue light shone in the woman's surroundings as extremely pure. Water attributed saint force pulsed from her body. It caused the air in the room to become moist, while droplets of water hung from the surrounding walls. The woman was Huang Luan, currently trapped here by the ancestor of the Huanggu clan, and forced to cultivate the scripture of the aquatic sunflower. She had already been trapped here for many years. During that time, she had always been imprisoned in that room, never to be able to leave it. She was completely cut off from the world, only able to cultivate, and then cultivate some more. She possessed the water spirit's body, while the scripture of the aquatic sunflower was a high-tiered cultivation method extremely suitable for people with saint force of the water attribute. As a result, the rate at which her strength increased could be described as extremely great during the years where she worked hard in the method, reaching the 6th cycle of Heaven Saint Master, now only an inch away from Saint Ruler. Although her speed was far from Jian Chun or Tai Ta's, it was equivalent to a prodigy that would only appear once every 10,000 years on the Tianyuan continent. After several years, Huang Luan's temperament had undergone a great change from before as well. The most evident part was that her pride and arrogance from before were now gone. She was becoming stronger-willed, even more mature and silent. Suddenly, the water blue light around Huang Luan vanished. She slowly opened her eyes, and within them hid a sliver of deep hatred. The scripture of the aquatic sunflower really is wondrous. After these years of cultivating with it, most of the poison left behind by that old bastard has been purged. There's only a small residue left which can't affect me. If I continue to work hard on cultivation, I'll immediately break through that old bastard's barrier once I reach Saint Ruler. I'll charge out and fight him to death. Afterward, the clan should hear about the news very soon, so they'll definitely come help save great-grandfather. Huang Luan calculated inside as determination flooded her face. After being trapped for so many years, she had seen through and understood a lot of things. She knew that the Huanggu clan wanted something from her, since they were holding Huang Tianba as hostage, imprisoning her there, and forcing her to cultivate. As a result, she had already made up her mind about the fact that she would die. The only reason why she focused on cultivation now was so that she could burst out of the room and spread the news, so that her great-grandfather could be saved. Suddenly, a muffled rumble rang out. The door slowly opened, and a simply dressed old man slowly walked in. He was the ancestor of the Huanggu clan. My dear Luaner, why haven't you been cultivating? You must work hard on cultivation and reach Saint Ruler as soon as possible. Once you reach Saint Ruler, I'll let your great-grandfather go. The ancestor smiled at Huang Luan. However, it seemed rather sinister in the dimly lit room. How is my great-grandfather right now? Huang Luan suppressed her intense hatred inside, and asked in a composed fashion. She was not an opponent of the ancestor right now. Don't worry. Your great-grandfather is fantastic right now. I haven't mistreated him one bit at all. The Huanggu clan ancestor smiled as he observed Huang Wan. He sighed inside. The water spirit's body sure can cultivate at an unbelievable speed, once it finds a suitable cultivation method. I never thought that this girl would reach 6th cycle Heaven Saint Master so soon. The ancestor slowly made his way to Huang Wan's side. He bit his index finger and squeezed out a droplet of blood. It hung in the air, and then he used it to draw an image with his index finger. What are you trying to do? Huang Wan's face changed slightly when she saw what the old man was doing. She felt an ill omen, and immediately began to back off cautiously. A while later, a complicated and indecipherable inscription was drawn by the ancestor of the Huanggu clan. It glowed with a demonic red light, and seemed to be filled with malevolence. The old man looked at Huang Wan and sniggered. My dear disciple, don't worry. Your master's beloved disciple after all. Master would never harm you. Come to your master's side. The old man slowly drew closer and closer to Huang Wan. The room was not big at all, so Huang Wan hit a wall very soon. Although the door was wide open, a barrier was present outside, so she could not flee at all. Even though she did not have an escape route, she did not show any fear at all. She knew that any attempt of resistance against the Huanggu clan ancestor, who had reached Saint Ruler many years ago, was futile. After some thought, she closed her eyes and began to silently accept this situation. The old man arrived before Huang Wan and sinisterly smiled. He slowly guided the inscription at the tip of his finger to the region between Huang Wan's eyebrows. As soon as the blood-red imprint came in contact with her skin, it disappeared into her head. Huang Wan suddenly began to show signs of pain, and she moaned in uncontrollable agony. She felt her head ache with extreme pain, as if her soul was being ripped apart. The old man's smile became even more sinister after the formation had successfully entered Huang Wan's head. A long while later, the pain in her head finally began to slowly recede. She stared at the old man with a rather pale face and coldly asked, "What was that before? What did you do to me?" "This is called the blood servant's imprint. I learned it recently from an ancient scripture. The blood servant's imprint won't cause you any harm. All it does is connect our fate. If I die, you die too." The ancestor slowly explained as he sighed a breath of relief inside. "Now it'll be easy. I've planted the imprint in the girl, so I'll be safe even if Jian Chun or the 10 protector clans come knocking on the door. I hope this girl can reach Saint Ruler a little after. Once she reaches Saint Ruler, the potential of the water spirit's body will be completely activated as well. At that time, if I absorb all her hidden potential and strength as a human cauldron, I'll reach Saint King immediately. I might even be able to reach Saint Emperor in the future." Chapter 1055. New Master of the Divine Hall 3. The ancestor of the Huanggu clan left, and the heavy door slowly slammed shut. Only Huang Wan was left in the dim room. Huang Wan did not show any panic or fear, even though she was now bound by the blood servant's imprint. She was extremely calm. She had already accepted her death long ago, so she did not care at all that her life was in someone else's hands. Huang Wan returned to the center of the room and sat down. She was dazed as memories filled her eyes. She mumbled, "Jianchen, I wonder where you are. How have you been in these years? Have you ever thought about me or missed me?" "Jianchen, every moment when we were together, as well as every little matter that occurred between us will be deeply embedded in my head. I will never forget you. All that can be blamed is fate. I cannot be with you forever. In the future, we may never meet again. I never thought that my last time seeing you was when we separated all those years ago." Huang Wan suddenly became sorrowful. 2 clear streaks of tears flowed uncontrollably down her cheeks. They landed on the cold floor and splashed apart. Deep sorrow filled the room. The fallen tears were like Huang Wan's heart, completely shattered and split into countless pieces. In the blink of an eye, another half a month passed. All the Saint Kings from the protector clans and ancient clans, as well as the Saint Rulers, stood scattered in the air around the Divine Hall. During that half a month, no one had left. They remained where they were, while the people of the protector clans and mercenary city all tried to think of ways to save their people trapped inside. The remaining saint rulers all remained there to watch it all unfold, and also to find out who the divine hall would belong to in the end. During that time, the people from the protector clans used countless methods and had attempted countless times, but it all resulted in failure. The divine hall's toughness was incomparable to other ordinary divine halls. They could not open the divine hall even when all of them tried as hard as they could. They even struggled to leave a mark on it. So many days have passed already, and they still haven't come out. There's no news of you either. I wonder what the situation is like inside. If it keeps dragging out, it will be detrimental to the people trapped inside, growled a great elder from the Shenxiao sect. He was extremely stern. We've called from outside for so many days, and even attacked the divine hall. But the divine hall does not respond at all. All it does is float here and absorb moonlight force. I think Fairy Haoyu's dead. If this continues, the people inside will definitely face life-threatening danger. This is why I would say that why don't we, the 10 clans, use our clan treasures, the emperor armaments, and smash through the entrance of the divine hall in one stroke. A burly middle-aged man in black robes also spoke his mind. He was a great elder from the Yangji sect. All the great elders of the protector clans changed slightly in expression when they heard about using the emperor armaments. They became hesitant. The emperor armaments of the protector clans were not any old emperor armament. They were weapons formed and strengthened from the fusion of dozens, or even 100 emperor armaments, through a secret technique over countless years. It combined all their power, so it possessed extremely great might. Using it would result in extremely great backlash to all of them, and they would all be injured. The Saint Kings trapped within the formation space of the Divine Hall had all lost their powers and collapsed on the ground, including He Yu and Hong Lian. Only Jianshan was perfectly fine. Many of them were ashen as despair filled their hearts. They had lost all hope, as if they had already been prepared to be trapped there for all their lives. At this moment, the formation space suddenly began to violently shake. The surrounding landscape began to quickly change and distort, gradually blurring. The change in the formation space alerted all the powerless Saint Kings. All of them immediately struggled to sit up, staring at the space in suspicion and surprise. What's happening? Has the formation begun to change, turning into a true killing formation to slaughter all of us here? A Saint King questioned weakly. His complexion was horrible. The faces of all the other people immediately sank when they heard that. Their complexions also became horrible, but they all continued to stare fixedly at the changing landscape. Very soon, the wasteland conjured by the formation vanished. It became rather dark for everyone, and when they could see their surroundings once more, they discovered that they had actually returned to the Divine Hall where the sculpture of Fairy Haoyu stood nearby. The formations vanished. The formations vanished. We've returned to where we were before. The formation must have run out of energy and dispersed. We're finally free. We've finally broken out of the damned formation space. Everyone became extremely emotional when they discovered that they had been freed. All of them uncontrollably cried out with joy. The Saint Kings who had already accepted their fate became even more emotional, becoming speechless. I will give you 5 seconds. Leave the Divine Hall immediately, or you won't be able to leave ever again. At this moment, a cold female's voice rang out. Fairy Haoyu's illusionary form currently floated above the sculpture in the center of the room. Her white clothes were like snow, and she seemed otherworldly, having transcended from mortal affairs. She seemed like a goddess. It's Fairy Haoyu. All the Saint Kings immediately cried out when they saw her. They became filled with disbelief. No, she's a soul. It's Fairy Haoyu's soul. Her soul is actually still alive. The Saint Kings possess great senses, much greater senses than Saint Rulers. They could tell that it was Fairy Haoyu's soul with a single glance, but even though that was the case, it still shocked them all. Saint Emperors had a life space of 10,000 years. Once that time was up, their bodies would begin to fall apart, and their souls would disperse. It was impossible for them to live much longer after those 10,000 years. Yet Fairy Haoyu was someone who had lived several tens of thousand years ago, and her soul actually still remained. It was unheard of to them. 2 seconds have passed. You have 3 left. Fairy Hao Yu said as she stared coldly at the Saint Kings. All of the people no longer bothered with her matters with that. They did not doubt her abilities to trap them for all of eternity. After all, the formation just before was more than enough evidence. They immediately charged out as fast as they could, but as they had all lost their powers, they could not fly. They ran like ordinary people. Chapter 1056. Yu Yu emerges. Jian Chen revealed a sliver of hesitation as he watched all the Saint Kings hurriedly run out. He did not leave immediately, and he looked around instead. He found that the entire place was rather empty, and that there was no other people present other than those who had been trapped in the formation. Esteemed Fairy Hao Yu, may I inquire about the situation for the other people who entered the Divine Hall? Jian Chen clasped his hands at Fairy Hao Yu's soul. Currently, the person he worried most for was Yu Yu. Fairy Hao Yu's gaze landed on Jian Chen, and an undetectable sliver of surprise appeared in her cold eyes. However, she spoke just as coldly as before. They've all left here. Jian Chen finally felt relieved when he heard that. Without saying anything more, he left with He Yu and Hong Lian. Jian Chen gave up on the idea of taking the Divine Hall since Fairy Hao Yu was still alive. She had been reduced to only a soul now, but Jian Chen dared not underestimate her. Jian Chen, He Yu, and Hong Lian left with Carolot and Kazda Jianxiong. The great elder from the Changyang clan had left long ago. With everyone's departure, the Divine Hall recovered its peace from before. Only Fairy Hao Yu's soul remained above the sculpture in the slightly dim room. I really do want to know where they got their armor and weapon with origin energy, but if I ask them now, it's unlikely that they will tell me. They might even weave some lies to trick me. Seeing how their relationship with Jian Chen is decent, I definitely will come in contact with them quite often in the future. At that time, I can just ask my dear disciple, Yu Yu, about the origin energy. It'll definitely be much easier. So many years have passed anyway. I wouldn't mind waiting a few more days at all. Jian Chen definitely cultivates chaotic force. He walks a cultivation path that is out of the ordinary. He will not need origin energy to increase his strength at all. So I really do hope he reaches the origin realm quickly. That way, I can return home through him. I hope nothing happens to the Moon God Hall. Father, you have to wait until your daughter returns, and then ruins Nan Potion's scheme. Outside the Divine Hall, the great elders from the Protector clans continued to waver over to use the Emperor armaments or not. The door of the Divine Hall suddenly swung open at that moment, and the Saint Kings that had been trapped in the formation stood at the doorway. All of them excitedly looked at the outside world, as if they had just survived a disaster. They've come out. The people from the Protector clans, and a few ancient clans, all became excited as well. They all flew toward the Divine Hall, taking back the Saint Kings who had lost their powers. Rui Jin, Xia Wang, and the Winged Tiger God also arrived before the main entrance. When they saw how He Yu and Hong Lian had both lost all their power, Rui Jin's face immediately changed. I never thought that your strengths would fall to such a level. Looks like the danger of the Divine Hall far exceeded anything I expected. You two better return to the artifact space first and recover. Afterward, He Yu and Hong Lian both entered the artifact space to recover their depleted energy. Brother Jian Chen, my energy is depleted, so it's just too inconvenient for me to return. I was wondering if I could spend a few days in the artifact space to recover, Carolot said to Jian Chen. Of course, Jian Chen agreed without any hesitation. He knew quite well that the Kara clan had many enemies. It would be difficult to even run away if Carolot faced them in his current situation. Kazda Jinxiong also requested out of his own accord to enter the artifact space to recover his strength after Carolot had been taken away. In the end, he was sent into the artifact space as well. Kazda Jinxiong was the same as Carolot. They had both lost their powers and dared not to return hastily. Changyang Zhu Yinshao supported the Great Elder, who had entered with them, and arrived before Jian Chen. He asked for Jian Chen's well-being out of concern before hurriedly leaving with the Great Elder. A few other saint rulers from the ancient clans all went up to support their ancestors, leaving the Divine Hall as well. A portion of them immediately began to return to their clans, while others stayed behind. They wanted to see who the Divine Hall would belong to in the end. Among the 10 protector clans, the Yuan sect, the Changyang clan, and the Pure Heart Pavilion chose to leave. The 7 other protector clans chose to stay behind, while the people from Mercenary City stayed behind as well. Many of them still cared about the Divine Hall very much. Jianchen had already dismissed all his thoughts regarding the Divine Hall. He said to Rue Jin, "Is Yu fine, Senior Rue Jin?" Rue Jin shook his head in response. Yu still hasn't come out. What? Yu hasn't left the Divine Hall? Jianchen became surprised with that, and immediately began to worry. A powerful ripple of energy appeared from behind him at this moment. He immediately turned around to look when he sensed the abnormality. He found that the Divine Hall had stopped absorbing moonlight force and was rapidly shrinking, becoming the size of a fist in just a few mere seconds. It was becoming a small, white but exquisitely crafted Divine Hall. Without the obstruction of the Divine Hall, a purple-dressed, elegant woman appeared before everyone. Yuer! Jianchen could not help but call out in joy when he saw the person, as it was Yu. Yu gestured with her hand, and the Divine Hall immediately flew obediently into her hand. It enveloped her entire body with hazy moonlight force, allowing her to become resistant to the unique environment of outer space. Yu saw Jianchen, and her face immediately stirred. Jianchen, you finally returned safely. I haven't let you down. I've successfully gained control of the Divine Hall, and saved you from it. Jianchen took a single step and appeared beside her, directly traversing several hundred meters. He felt pleasantly surprised as he stared at the bright moon Divine Hall in her hand and asked in disbelief, Yuer, what did you just say? You've successfully gained control of the Divine Hall? Yu immediately felt pleased with herself when she saw Jianchen's surprise. She nodded firmly. Then Fairy Haoyu. Jianchen paused. He felt confused inside. Fairy Haoyu was clearly still alive, so how did the Divine Hall end up in someone else's hands? Jianchen, Fairy Haoyu has accepted me as her disciple. She's my master now, Yu said rather proudly. She smiled sweetly as she was extremely happy. Jianchen was stunned with that, but he soon became overjoyed as well. It was even rarer than the Divine Hall for Yu to become a disciple of Fairy Haoyu. The surrounding saint rulers and saint kings heard their conversation clearly. When they learned that Yu had indeed obtained the Divine Hall, and even become a disciple of Fairy Haoyu, the saint rulers who had fought over the scepter were greatly affected, deepening the regret and unwillingness within them. The saint kings looked at Yu with deep envy, coupled with a sliver of extremely well and deeply hidden jealousy. However, they all knew about the relationship between Yu and Jianchen, which is why they dared not let the thought of taking it cross their minds before Jianchen. On the other hand, the people of the protector clans seemed very calm. Divine halls may be extremely precious to ancient clans, but they seemed common and ordinary to the ancient protector clans. Even if the amount of divine halls that were inherited from their predecessors was ignored, just the quantity that they obtained from other sources was plentiful. What truly made the protector clans drool over was Fairy Haoyu's cultivation method. Yu's talent for cultivation also underwent an overwhelming change under the transformation of Moonlight Essence. She was enough to be called a great genius now. Her strength had passed through Great Saint Master and Earth Saint Master, reaching Heaven Saint Master. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.